their high wall to an adjacent hotel. A police officer said the weapon used in the attack belonged to the boy's stepfather, who is being questioned. The boy's motive for the attack is as yet unknown. The local government has ordered classes suspended for 3 days at all schools in the state.
Recapping the story, police in KwaZulu-Natal have recovered drugs worth 13 million rand from a vessel carrying buses from South America at the Durban harbour. For SAfm News, I am Anne Musa.
SAfm 104 to 107 nationwide, leading the conversation. The Daily Discourse on SAfm with Joanne Joseph, unpacking the issues that matter. The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
It is 9:07 here on the Daily Discourse. Welcome to your Wednesday edition of the program. I'm Joanne Joseph. Great to be with you as always. What a chilly morning it is in Johannesburg. I think it was about 6 degrees when I left home. I'm sure in other parts of the country it's even worse. So I'm giving you the opportunity to vent this morning. If you feel that you want to talk about how miserable you are in the cold, I promise I will listen in and I will empathize. And of course, the studio temperature here is set to the Arctic setting. So it's not particularly warm, but let's try and deal with some hot topics that at least get us going this morning. The team is with you, Melissa and Gineowe, taking your calls and producing the show. Mbo is on sound and Dallas is on cameras today. Watch us on SAfm Radio on Facebook, X and YouTube. You can also listen live on your radio. You can stream our audio from the SAfm website and you can listen to us on DSTV channel 814. We also start the show off with our open line every day, as you know, and we love hearing from you at this time of the day. You can call in on our studio line 086 000 2032. You can also send a voice note or a text to our WhatsApp line on 061 410. Let me actually break this up better. 0614 104 107. 0614 104 107. Just keep your calls and your voice notes short, and we'll chat to as many of you over the morning as we can. So some of the big stories that we are watching for you on the show this morning. You've heard the proclamation of the election date. The 4th of November is when we'll head to the polls for the local government elections. And I was wondering from you whether you will be voting this year, and I'll tell you why. I was thinking of how much the political landscape has changed over the last few years, right? In a way, local government elections are even harder to understand than general elections. Proportional representation, other complex processes that come into play. The Electoral Commission's work is ramping up as we speak. We know there's a weekend of voter registration coming up, and there'll be a fair amount of voter education in the next few months. We'll do quite a lot of it here on SAfm and particularly on the Daily Discourse. And we'll be ensuring that you have the right information you need to make the right choice. But today we're going to be speaking to 4 individuals who know the election process intimately, and 2 of those are going to be talking to us about a Human Sciences Research Council survey that was carried out, right? They held this research. They essentially worked towards this research where they were trying to get a sense from people as to how they feel about the upcoming election. The results of that research are not positive. They're showing a great deal of voter apathy, and people are saying, no, we don't want to vote. And we don't feel like voting actually makes a change to the way the country is run. So that's one of the things that was said. One of the other things that was said in that survey, which really concerns me, and tell me how you feel about this. A lot of people interviewed said that instead of having a democratic system, they would rather have an autocracy. So they'd rather have an authoritarian regime in power dictating a certain set of rules rather than a democratic government. And I was pretty shocked. I was pretty taken aback by that. I don't know how you feel about that. Am I living in a fool's paradise, thinking that we are in many ways trying to make democracy work for us? I was under the impression that post-apartheid, we'd never want to see that kind of autocratic society again. And here we are, people saying to researchers that they would actually prefer a return to that society. So we'll be having that conversation in just a short while. And I'd love to know from you, will you be voting? Do you see the ballot box as one of the most effective ways to change what is going on in the country? Or have you given up on voting because you don't believe that it's made a material change to your life? And I'd love to hear from you on that. A story that's come up in Parliament, the Democratic Alliance saying over 800 rape cases have been closed because the South African Police Service couldn't find the survivors. That is a pretty big number. In fact, there was a discrepancy in their numbers in general in terms of what they reported to Parliament. And so there are all sorts of questions that arise out of that. How do you manage to lose track of over 800 rape survivors? I just don't quite understand how that happened. Did people move? Did they change their phone numbers? Did their addresses change? Or was the case taking so long to come to court that those survivors were just not able to stay in contact? I wonder, did they suddenly decide, actually, we don't want to be a part of this anymore because we're being re-traumatized by the system? We'll have a conversation about that in just a short while. It was based on a question that the DA raised in Parliament, and those were the answers that they got. We'll speak to an expert about that as well. And then, of course, at 11 o'clock, Brian Hirsch, who is a financial planning expert, is going to be back with us today. He's going to regularly be with us on a Wednesday morning, and from 11 to 11:30 he'll be talking through some aspect of financial planning or advisory services that you might need. And you're welcome to just give us a call or send us a voice note or a text and tell us what's on your mind in regard to the topic. Today we're talking about the issue of financial planning. I think financial planning has become increasingly difficult for us. As times become harder, the cost of living rises, we find it more and more difficult to save money. We can't often stay the course, right? You might take out a policy when you're young and enter financial planning with the best of intentions, and then all of a sudden the money dries up along the way. You perhaps don't get the best jobs, you lose your work, you're not able to earn consistently. And what goes first? It's the grudge purchases like insurance and that kind of thing. So we'll talk to Brian about that and how we weather those storms as well. And we'd love to hear from you once he's in our studio with us at 11. Right now, though, we are taking those calls, texts and voice notes on the Daily Discourse. Talk to us.
Investing shouldn't feel risky. It should give you security and good returns. Earn up to 7.25% interest per annum with an ABSA Cash Invest Tracker for an investment of 100,000 rands or more. Your capital is guaranteed with immediate access to your funds. That's minimum risk, maximum benefit. ABSA Private Banking customers can invest from just R1. Open via the ABSA Banking app, a branch, a private banker, or 0860 111 515. Your story matters. ABSA is an authorized financial services provider. T's and C's apply.
Call SAfm now on 086 000 2032.
Did you watch what went on in court yesterday in regard to the national health insurance? I'm curious to know what you thought about what was said. I had the impression going in that, based on what Nosipo Khadebe, our SABC News reporter, had told us, that the conversations that took place in the Constitutional Court yesterday were simply going to be confined to the issues of consultation, right? I thought, well, consultation is the main bugbear that these two entities, the Western Cape Government and the Board of Healthcare Funders, have brought before this court. And so they're going to talk about whether government made enough of an effort to consult with members of the public, consult with experts, consult the medical aides and so forth. And that is what the conversation is going to be essentially restricted to. It wasn't confined to that. It actually spilled out into all sorts of interesting arguments that we brought up in our interviews yesterday. And you may remember we spoke to people like Alex van den Heever, the professor of governance at Wits, who made interesting comments about the planning in terms of what the NHI is going to cost. Look, I don't think it's an easy thing to cost by any stretch of the imagination, right? It's not easy to cost because they would have to cost for the next 25 years. And of course, there are all sorts of things that come into costing over such a long period of time. And one would, in any way, expect the government to be agile along the way and to rework that costing plan as they go. Having said that, it almost looks as though they went into court without any kind of clarity at all. And they were asked a lot of questions. Government was asked a lot of questions about the fiscal issue. What is it going to cost? Is it clear? Where are the numbers? That there was a lot of focus on that. And the fact that no basic numbers had been put together, not even just the kind of fundamentals, were put together and presented to the court, it really, I think it irked the judges that there was nothing to actually work with. There was nothing tangible that government had gone in there with in terms of even offering hazarding a guesstimate at a cost of NHI. And so that is probably the conversation that is going to continue today, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds in court. And I'm also looking forward to speaking to our reporter Nosipho Khadebe, who's going to bring us an update and recap what happened in court yesterday. We'll speak to her in just a moment. Taking your calls right now. Okay, we don't have anyone on the calls on the line right now, but remember, you are more than welcome to give us a shout and tell us exactly what you think about what is happening in the country today. I am really looking forward to seeing what is going to happen with this as it goes to court over the next couple of days, the NHI ruling, because we're going to have a very definite ruling by that court, hopefully in the next few days, as to how government is going to be proceeding with it. And then we're also looking at the issue later on of, we are going to be looking at this issue tomorrow of the Phala Phala issue that is coming to court. Actually, that's going to be concluded in court on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. That's another big one. And you'll remember the background to that case, that the EFF had gone to court and it had said to the court, this is unacceptable, the way Parliament has handled the Phala Phala issue. The fact that they have not essentially called the president to answer over the Phala Phala issue. That's going to be a big one in the next few days. And we're going to see that gain a little bit of momentum as we move towards Friday. But hopefully we'll be hearing from the court on exactly what their stance is on Phala Phala, how that is to proceed. Is it going to be investigated? We haven't seen suspensions. We've seen people like Wally Rueda and one other Presidential Protection Service individual actually being their actions being called into question afterwards. We still see them active in their positions as part of the PPS. What is going to happen in regard to that? So there's a lot happening in the courts over the next few days. It's amazing how many of these issues are being solved in the courts, but it also reminds us of why we need to be living in a country where the judiciary is independent, the judiciary is trustworthy, and they're able to make these laws and judgments that positively affect the future of our democracy. All right, Bonakele, where are you, Bonakele? I'm not sure where you are, but you want to talk about Julius Malema. Good morning to you, Bonakele.
Absolutely. A very good morning to you. And I'm in Cape Town, so to speak. In
Cape Town. Okay. Is it freezing there, Bonakele?
Say it again.
Is it freezing in Cape Town this morning?
Freezing, and even right now it's freezing. But yesterday it was quiet, but today it's changed completely. It's freezing, of course, but it's not cold, so to speak.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you're tougher than I am.
Yeah. Well, before I'm gonna say whatever that I was calling for. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow it's my birthday, 7th of May. This young man was born.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This young man was born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to you for tomorrow, Bonakele.
I'm turning 61.
Okay. All right? Congratulations. So
I guess a hot man, Cindy. Afrikaans praat.
A Bikkie.
Ek kan Afrikaans praat, ja. Ek is 61 môre, ja.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. What are your thoughts about Malema?
Yes, I want to talk about very much interesting and wants to see if whether is this not a plan of trying by all means. Malema said something that was very interesting, to say this country relies on ANC, EFF, and MK Party. Just imagine MK Party, EFF, Malema, so to speak. They come together, work hand in hand with the ANC. Is this not a way of pushing Ramaphosa out as president? That's what I was thinking. That's probably what they are planning to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think that's their plan? You think that's their plan, Bonakele?
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting.
And who would be the president of a party like that? Would it be Jacob Zuma in charge of the party? Maybe Julius Malema, his deputy?
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Because the former president, Utatu Zuma, doesn't really want to quit politics, although
No, seemingly
he's that age. He's very much old. I mean,
yeah.
do you think we can be led by Utatu Zuma once again?
It's a good
Having
question.
taken this kind of, that's a question
it's
I'm
a good
asking
question.
myself.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
And it's a lovely question. Bonakele is asking the question, could we see a coalition, some kind of agreement or a venture between these parties, the MK party and the EFF, and could they, if they joined forces, unseat the ANC or push Cyril Ramaphosa out of power? I mean, I'd be interested to hear your comments on that. I don't know the answer to that. We know that Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma have met in the past. They have cordial relations. Would either of them be prepared to actually join forces and coalesce to kind of to achieve their ends? And how would we as South African voters react to Jacob Zuma potentially being a future leader of the country after his presidency in the past? How would you feel about that? You can give us a call if you'd like to speak about that. All right, I'm going to take some of your voice notes in just a short while, but I want to get an update on what is going on outside the Constitutional Court right now. 2 cases casting the spotlight on the National Health Insurance, and they're back in court for a second day. The Constitutional Court has been listening to the complaints of the Board of Health Funders and the Western Cape government, who say the consultation around the NHI wasn't extensive enough. But the judges themselves asked some important questions around the cost of the proposed NHI, as I mentioned earlier. Now, our SABC economics reporter Nosipo Khadebe brings us the details of this after having spent all of yesterday in court. Good morning to you, Nosipo. And I'm very, very interested to to reflect on what happened in court yesterday. I see that the judges raised concerns around expenditure related to the NHI.
A very good morning to you, Joanne, and to the listeners. Indeed, we actually heard from the justices yesterday, Justice Stephen Majid. He had questioned the affordability of the National Health Insurance as we saw the cost, funding, and where this money would come up or where the money would come from to sort of pay for these healthcare services. That was raised in court yesterday. And Parliament, of course, had a response to that. But Justice Majid had questioned, or raised concerns about how the full cost of NHI, how's that going to work, but also noting that it's likely to be expensive if we're pooling the funds or pooling funds that will cover both public and private healthcare. And it was also noted, that we have problems in the South African healthcare system. And so would these problems still persist? Because just because there's money being pooled doesn't mean that the problems that were there in the healthcare system before all of a sudden fall away. So he asked about the funding implications, and said, these remain unclear from their understanding as the justice is looking into this case. But Parliament said, Parliament's legal representative, Advocate Maneja, said yesterday that, look, they're unable to come up with how much this would fully cost over the next 25 years. And so they understand that government would use the same process that was used during the funding of grants, where even though government at the time wasn't sure of how much, the grants would cost and where they'd be getting this money, government or Treasury managed to sort of pool the funds to ensure then that grants were able to be rolled out and there's enough funds available then for citizens who are in need of that funding. So the issue around funding certainly coming up because, as we know, the whole reason around the NHI is not about access to healthcare, but access to universal coverage of healthcare. And that's, of course, where the medical aids then come in, because then if these funds are being pooled for certain services, medical aids would offer less services than what they were offering in the past.
Right. Tell me, what was said about the number of submissions made to Parliament and what it cost Parliament to invite the various submissions? Because, of course, that all stems from why this case went to court in the first place.
So we understand that the submissions to Parliament today were quite extensive because, of course, the issue around meaningful participation, that came up, of course, under the BHS, their case, bringing their case, of course, to the Constitutional Court. But we understand that there are about 300,000, or rather there were 11,000 submissions that were made, I beg your pardon. And then, of course, they received 338,000 written submissions. And so they held extensive hearings around this, and Parliament argues or maintains then that the process was comprehensive and aimed at universal coverage. But of course, it was expensive to roll out these hearings and ensure across the 9 provinces and ensure that all the various stakeholders who had, thoughts on the NHI, that they were afforded the opportunity to speak around the NHI. We know about 11,500 people had attended, with just over 950 oral submissions then recorded across all the 9 provinces. So a lot of work going into hearing then from the various stakeholders, hearing from the public, engaging on the NHI. But the BHF, of course, saying that they felt that this sort of process was more of a rubber stamping approach, a tick box approach to the public engagement, because they felt that, some of these submissions were not fully used when it came to changing the law or enhancing the law and the NHI scheme, as it were. And that's where the issue around public engagement or meaningful public engagement sort of came up during yesterday's proceedings.
Right. So where will arguments before the court pick up this morning, Nosipho?
So arguments will pick up from the Western Cape government today. We heard from Parliament, we heard from the BHF, of course, setting out their various cases, and then, of course, responding then to the justices. But we'll hear from the Western Cape government today, and they, of course, are arguing that the NCOP, that they sort of also rubber stamped the bill and actually had pushed in haste to, push the legislation through without following proper procedure. So we'll be hearing from their legal representatives today, just outlining the case that they were not afforded the proper opportunity to influence the lawmaking process, as it were.
Nosipho Radebe, SABC News reporter, thank you so much for giving us that detailed scene setter to what happens as court begins today around about 10 o'clock. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to catch up with Nosipho again tomorrow as the case continues in the Constitutional Court. Some of you commenting on the Madlanga Commission. I see it's starting right now in Pretoria, and we're expecting Hawks Head Major General Hendrik Flynn to get back on the stand today. One of you has sent us a voice note about his testimony.
Good day, Sis JJ, and happy Wednesday to all the SAfm listeners. Yo, Sis JJ, the witness at the Madlanga Commission currently, the general, he is unlike the other generals who are incompetent and corrupt, but work with the criminal syndicates. The current witness is concise and straight to the point, abrupt. He is tendering evidence without fear or favor or any contradictions. He's just telling it as it is. I pick up to this guy. Unlike those generals who need to be dethroned of those titles, that's Tolo Lagamandla, Lulamile Sioko Echikacha, Tango will remain humble Mapagani.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that message. 9:30 it is. The Madlanga Commission resuming as we speak, and we're getting your latest news headlines with Anne Musa.
Good morning. Thanks, Joanne. In the headlines, the Meiringsport Pass, which links Oudtshoorn in the Little Karoo to Beaufort West in the Central Karoo, has been closed due to flooding. Heavy rain is currently falling in the area. Police in KwaZulu-Natal have recovered drugs worth 13 million rand from a vessel carrying buses from South America at the Durban harbour. The drugs were discovered yesterday during an operation that began in April this year. And the National Coloured Congress leader Fadil Adams' lawyer says Adams is likely to appear in court tomorrow, as he has not yet been formally charged. Earlier reports indicated that he was expected to appear in a Durban court this morning. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
SAfm. Prime time all day long.
Investing shouldn't feel risky. It should give you security and good returns. Earn up to 7.25% interest per annum with an ABSA Cash Invest Tracker for an investment of 100,000 rands or more. Your capital is guaranteed with immediate access to your funds. That's minimum risk, maximum benefit. ABSA Private Banking customers can invest from just R1. Open via the ABSA Banking app, a branch, a private banker, or 0860 111 515. Your story matters. ABSA is an authorized financial services provider. T's and C's apply.
This May, SAfm invites you to be exposed and engaged in a different conversation. Not the Africa you think you know, but the Africa that surrounds you. What does it mean to be African today? In our politics, in our economies, in our cross-border movements, in our rich cultures, in our evolving identities. Every day we traverse this continent. 54 countries, 54 unique stories, one shared future. From Lagos to Nairobi, Accra to Addis Ababa, and right here at home. Because South Africa is not separate from Africa. It is a vital part of it. SAfm Africa Month. Conversations, context, connection. Call SAfm now on 086 000 2032.
We're edging towards 25 minutes to 10 here on the Daily Discourse. Mabelane Mfundisi is on the line to us. Mabelane, good morning. I believe you're from the Civil Society Forum.
Yes, Joanne from TV. It's nice to hear Joanne on radio.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. We are part of those that are advocating for the NHI. Actually, this process, in a way, is a bit of an irritation, but it's part of the democratic processes.
Yeah, I guess so.
Way back in 2019, when the engagement started, as part of civil society organizations, as part of the 300 and something thousand that is being counted, the 11,000, our voices are part and parcel of that. And we occupy the same space as the Board of Healthcare Funders. It's not how much you have in your bank account that makes you matter in democracy. It is the fact that you are part and parcel of, the democratic order. Now, I think it's alarmist for the focus to be on the questioning, and I'm not in Judge Majid's head that he made, but the case is the case brought by the Board of Healthcare Funders.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting for you to have an engagement about what they put as their case and the issues that were asked of them. Because as you understand, the courts deal with what are the issues.
Absolutely. I thought of the same thing, to be honest. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The issue is, was there meaningful public engagement?
Yes.
That is what is in front of the Constitutional
Quite right.
Court.
It's a very narrow. It's a very narrow kind of what can I say, area of that's being looked at here. The issue, it's not. We're not looking at pricing yet here. I was very surprised, to be honest, and maybe the legal eagles who are listening to the show will tell us why it happened that Judge Majid broadened the conversation into the cost of NHI. But I am curious to know why he did that.
Because the issue is about consultation, and the Board of Healthcare Funders spend the whole day, almost the whole day, trying to articulate their case. And the questions that, because it's a full bench of the Constitutional Court, 11 judges with the Chief Justice.
Yes.
And the questions that they were asking them about the case that they are making, confining it to what their issues are about.
Right.
It's a different story that will be told than just what Judge Majid said when he was asking Advocate Manager, who presented a case in response to the matter that the BHF was talking about.
Right.
Remember, there are other 7-8 cases. There's another Constitutional Court case that the BHF has put on place. So it's like, if it is not according to the BHF, at least from where I'm sitting, then it is not good enough. It can't be, because they are not We are all South Africans.
Okay, thank
we have
you.
a stake in this.
No, thank you for that, Mabelane, and thank you for sharing that. That was why I mean, that was one of my first questions to Nosipho, our reporter, because it seemed to me that line of questioning seemed to me to be, a little bit outside of the court's area of exploration right now. Let's put it that way. Thank you for that. Charlie in Koffiefontein is on the line to us. Charlie, good morning. What's on your mind this morning?
Good morning, Joanne.
Hi there.
I'm saying, I think it was this week or Sunday or last week, the senators in Nigeria have now put a bill forward so that they can cut all trade relations with South Africa because they are saying their people are being attacked over the protests that are happening in South Africa. These are the people that are importing almost 470 million from us, and we are importing 3 times that amount. So the trade surplus is very different. What they're importing, we are importing 3 times from them. And their politicians are writing think pieces on social media, on their platforms regarding these attacks. What I have not heard from one government, whether it's Nigeria, Mozambique, who, by the way, they also had protests, I think, Monday or Tuesday, or Ghana, or whatever, every country. I've never had one government official coming out to condemn their countrymen for doing what they are doing in South Africa. People should not think when we trade for them, they are allowed to give us illegal foreigners. Because they think when we trade for them, then they can just send everybody to our country and we should accept it. Whereas they themselves do not allow it in their own country.
Yeah,
It's
an interesting thing that they're planning to repatriate any of their nationals who want to leave South Africa.
So far, I've heard there's only 149 who have signed up for them.
Yeah.
These people will never leave South Africa if we do not enforce our laws.
All right. Thank you.
My point that I want to
Yes, Charlie. Sorry that I had to cut you off there, but thank you. Or did you drop the line there? Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I think there's a good point being made there. That why would you want to close relations between yourself and another African country, right? Every effort is being made to keep relations open and to work towards a kind of Pan-African ideal. Just about every country in Africa is working towards that. The AFCFTA is supposed to encourage us to trade even more. On an intra-African level. And I just don't think that this is the way to deal with it. I mean, it's saying that you're going to cut people off. Open the negotiations, talk about it, right? Begin the dialogue. If you have concerns, address them to the president to president. You have your various officials, you've got Nigerian representatives, ambassadors and other such officials in South Africa on the ground. Start those conversations here if needs be. I don't know if we should jump to the option of just cutting each other off when these disagreements arise. Tukolo in Harrismith is on the line to us. Good morning, Tukolo. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Sir Joanne. How are you?
I'm so well, thank you. A little cold, but fine otherwise.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, my sister, I'm concerned about this coalition. Between this one that's gonna be between ANC and EFF and MP.
Yes.
Now I'm still don't trust those people. We need more than 3. If maybe we can add TA on that and the other parties, I think it would be much better. Not only these 3, because those 3 are still criminals.
But
I don't trust them.
You don't trust them. But look, I mean, ideologically, they may be more aligned than other parties, right? For example, the ANC and the DA have some fundamental disagreements over issues like NHI. There's so many issues that you could just name off the top of your head. BEE. There's so many issues over which they diverge. I know they have managed to be in a government together, right? Or in a couple of governments together, actually. Do you see them ideologically aligning as parties?
No, I think they will sort that thing out. They will discuss that so that they can agree on one thing. Because those 3 still those three, I don't trust them. We need a DA on that and other parties so that they can be that debate before they can take any decision, you understand?
All right.
Because those three, same WhatsApp group, they are coming from ANC. I don't trust them. They must add a DA and other parties so that this GNU, I think it's going to work for us so that we can go or can get a way forward.
All right.
Otherwise,
yeah.
besides DA or other ones, I don't trust them.
Thank you. No, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And
you.
you are welcome to comment on that if you'd like to. Do you agree with that? 086 000 2032. Our WhatsApp line 0614 104 107. We'll take a short break. When we come back, I'll listen to some of your voice notes.
The Daily Discourse. More than talk, real understanding. SAfm has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. The Daily Discourse on SAfm. Weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
We're heading towards 9:45 here on the Daily Discourse, and one of you was talking about the issue of the coalition between or among the EFF, the MK Party, and the ANC, and saying he just doesn't trust those three parties. They all stem from the ANC, and he feels another party needs to be brought in for balance, possibly the DA. Let's listen to a voice note on this.
Hi, ma'am. This is Vusi from Madlanga. I'm telling you, if Jacob Zuma has to come back and lead us again, that will be a big mistake that will be happening in the country. Really, that will be a nightmare. And I think the first people to come back, if he becomes president, the Guptas will be coming back fully. The Guptas will be all over the country again. And I'm sure they'll land again in Waterkloof. That will be a nightmare. It's a bad dream. If that man must stop by all means. He must not come near power again. Never.
At least we'd know where the Guptas are and we'd be able to arrest them. That's on the upside. But, I mean, having said that, I wonder if that horse has bolted. Are we living in a slightly different time, a post-Zuma era, that is now opening up to us a sense of what has happened over the last few years in the country in terms of leadership? When we see things like Madlanga and various other inquiries on the go, when we see the commissions unfold, we see the court processes unfold, we see the SIU and other law enforcement agencies doing their work. Are we living in a post-Zuma era, or can we imagine a future with Jacob Zuma as a president, possibly once again in the future? Mpo in Randfontein, what are your thoughts on this? Good morning.
Well, good morning, and good morning to your listeners. I think there is a progressive forces. If they come together, there is no problem. Anyway, all of them are from the ANC. And the ANC has never been anti-white. It has always been anti-imperialism. So I would wish they come together, but they should also recruit, because the ANC should not be a black party, like other South Africans are left out. There must be an aggression to bring all progressive white people, colored and Indians. And they are there. It's not like they are not there. They are progressive people. So that you also don't dominate the party with a face that does not represent what South Africa looks like. So non-racialism, progressive forces across the board, build a country, go back to where was the initial thought. Mm-hmm. Of a country that is prosperous, non-sexist, non-racial, and all of us have access and power, and we enjoy ourselves in peace.
Yeah.
So that this thing of emphasizing black this, and overlook the fact that this country is not only black, it's also have white. And a lot of them who are alienated on the outside because the messaging of the progressive forces has gone too black. And I'm a black person, but I don't think we represent what ordinarily this country was thought of. I mean, the guys who met in Mangaung in 1912 were very clear of what needs to be.
No, true, Mpho. I think you're making some good points then. Sorry that we can't continue that conversation, Mpho, because we are coming up to our next interview. But I think you've expressed very well what you wanted to say. And how do you feel about what Mpho has just said? Do you feel, if you consider yourself a progressive South African, and you are in favor of empowerment and the rebuilding of this country and the services, ensuring that people receive the services, people receive the upliftment and the empowerment that they deserve as citizens. How do you feel that ought to be achieved? Should we return to that dream, that euphoria that perhaps even precedes democracy? That everybody in South Africa ought to have been co-opted into the democracy project, and that people have been left behind along the way. I don't know how I feel about that, but I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are on that on our studio line 086 000 2032. All right, we're heading for 10 minutes to 10 here on the Daily Discourse, and a Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament, Lisa Schikkeling, has said 837 rape cases were closed in the last 3 years because the South African Police Service couldn't trace the survivors. Schikkeling says the SAPS numbers didn't seem to add up either, with a discrepancy of 49 cases. Research Associate of the Southern Centre for Inequality Studies at Wits University, Lisa Vetten, will try to help us make head or tail of what is actually happening here. Good morning to you, Ms. Vetten, and thank you so much for your time. I want to start with the issue of the actual number of cases. How is it possible that the number of cases withdrawn and those listed as undetected didn't actually add up in the answer to this question?
That is a question only the police can answer, and it does talk to limitations in the way they do things. But I think it's a broader problem. I mean, if we look at the figures that they've been giving for femicide, up to 3 different figures in 2023-24, for example, were given for the same year, and the difference is as much as the difference between the lowest and the highest of those 3 numbers was as much as 2,100. That's a very significant deviation, and talks to some very serious problems, I think, around what's being counted, how things are being calculated, who's counting, and what systems they mean. So I think there is a broader problem around counting accurately within the police.
And what does this tell us about the SAPS reporting processes in the first place?
Well, I think the figures, I'd like to just put MP Schikkelling's figures around untraceable cases into some context.
Okay.
And I'm going to base this on the fact that we've done some research. We did research in Gauteng in 2003 and nationally in 2012 that tracked police dockets and what happened to them. So I think the first thing to say is that the number that is being given for over a 3-year period is small. It would be roughly 259 cases per year lost due to, I'm talking just averaging over the 3 years, 259 cases being lost per year, which averages out at roughly, if you look at the roughly 42,000 rapes being reported annually, that's 0.01%. So the number she's been given is very, very small. It's actually lower than the figure that came up in our research in 2003 and 2012, where we saw that the number of victims who became untraceable ranged between 2% and 3%.
All right.
That's the first question.
Mm-hmm.
The second question is why they're becoming untraceable. And here there are questions around how much of this is due to victims choosing not to be or not wanting to be contacted by the police again for a range of reasons.
Yeah.
And some of it is due to sloppy police work or possibly even corruption.
So let's explore that a little bit in a bit more detail. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons that are being put forward. Some people say, and I watched the reaction on social media just to see what people had to say in response to this. And some of them put forward, well, people move, people change their contact details. People don't update the investigating officer as they should when they move to a different place or when their phone number changes. I mean, what are the most common reasons that these cases become untraceable.
That's absolutely correct. And I think you can't blame the police for that. You see a similar problem happening in people's health records and being able to contact them through hospitals and clinics. I think where you start to see where problems are suggested, and I'll give you an example that we saw in our research, was a case that was closed within 4 days of being opened. The investigating officer had tried to contact the victim exactly once and had then closed the case saying the victim is untraceable. That's very different to because the police keep a diary where they record all their efforts and what they've done in an investigation.
Right.
So that case is very different to the other cases we saw where an officer had tried 15 times to try to locate the complainant. So I think you have to look at them quite carefully. Some of them are the reasons that people on social media gave. And I think in Gauteng, which is a province with a very high degree of mobility, you'll see more people disappearing on that basis than in smaller provinces like the Northern Cape, where there are few people, there is not a lot of mobility. But it's the cases where they're closed almost immediately and only one attempt has been made to contact the victim that one should be, and then they're declared untraceable, that one should be suspicious about.
I want to talk about the issue of secondary victimization as well, because I'm wondering whether a couple of other factors may be at play here possibly, and that is when someone goes to the police station to report a crime of this nature, that they're not treated the way they ought to be. They're not given the support they need. They are, in a sense, they are victimized on a secondary basis. And then the pace of the investigation is so slow, and it is sometimes handled with so little care that a survivor then starts to say, is it actually worth it, dragging this out? I'm trying to move on with my life. I don't want to face questions at the hands of a hostile police officer. Or imagine what it would be like if they caught someone and I went to court and I had to relive this entire trauma. I'd come out so much worse on the other side. Do you think that's ever a factor?
That would definitely be a factor. And I think there would also be the fact that even if the case had been progressing and there had been contact, people also reached a point where the court case is taking so long that they decide that's it, they're going to disengage now. So yes, it's a multifaceted problem, which would mean we need to take a range of different kinds of steps, I think, in order to reduce the number of victims who not only become untraceable, but also withdraw their matters, because they also want to get on with their lives. This just takes up too much time, it goes nowhere, and they may also have been experiencing secondary victimization that you've alluded to. So we should look at beyond just the problem of becoming untraceable, but also when complainants withdraw their matters.
Are survivors watching all of this less likely to report a rape when they hear of these kinds of discrepancies?
They may well do. That can certainly happen. Otherwise, some people have a burning sense of injustice and will go ahead regardless. And may have the capacity, the friends, the support mechanisms who will be there to help encourage them to push on. But I mean, then you have those victims who are entirely isolated for whatever reasons. They don't have family and friends around them. And I think when you are battling a system all by yourself, it's much more difficult to sustain the energy to continue to battle, to push and demand for your rights.
Looking at the reaction on social media, and this is a comment just in regard to possible rape culture in our country. Many men are asserting that these women were largely untraceable because they lied about being raped. How should we read that reaction, Ms. Vetten?
Defensiveness. I mean, we have absolutely no evidence for that. So unless they can tell us how they would know that, that's just speculation. It says more about your attitude to rape than the possible facts. So I think, the police we need, before you can decide whether or not somebody has lied, you need to have a very clear definition of what does it mean to be untruthful. Of course, there may be a small number who are untruthful, but that is the case in every single crime. And in fact, it tends to be quite high in cases, obviously, where you have insurance and you want a better television or a better cell phone. So yes, people will always be untruthful for whatever reason. But it's the fact that that's the default explanation when somebody withdraws or disappears in rape that is troubling. So I think what we need to have in order to ensure, especially within the police, that this perception doesn't exist, to have a very, very clear definition of what does it mean to say that a claim is unfounded, potentially having no basis in fact, so that you rule out situations exactly like the ones you've been describing, where somebody just feels, I cannot continue. I need to get on with my life, and I'm actually going to go move to another province and start all over again.
Lisa Vetten, thank you so much for speaking to us. Research Associate for the Southern Centre for Inequality Studies and a research consultant at the Faculty of Humanities. So, I mean, there's some very interesting issues that were raised there. I don't know if you know of a family member or a friend who experienced this. Perhaps you've experienced it yourself. Have you gone to report some kind of sexual violence? How were you received at the police station? Were you treated with respect? Were you given the support that you needed to make a report? I just cannot imagine how traumatic it must be to go through that process, because you're standing in what is essentially a public place. You know, people are around you. You want to report an invasion of your intimacy, right? A really violent invasion of your intimate space. And you go there and, you know, people are shouting across you, oh, we need an FFS officer here because this woman wants to report a rape. You know, it's... The circumstances in certain police stations, and I'm not painting them all with the same brush, but I know because I've interviewed rape survivors, and the things that they tell me about how they were treated, I can quite well see how many of them would have decided not to pursue a case and try to move on with their lives and forget what happened to them, even though that's probably not possible at all, just so that they don't have to go through the process again of reliving this at the hands of people who are insensitive towards their plight. So if you'd like to share something like that and you feel comfortable doing so, please do tell us your side of the story in regard to this. Listening to some of your voice notes as well, one of you is speaking about the issue of the Fadil arrest, which took place yesterday.
Good morning, Joanne and the listeners. Joanne, I would like to comment on Fadil's arrest. I find it very interesting that Mkonazi sees his way fit to collect Fadil in a police van and drive him up to KZN in a police van. I've seen so many senior ANC politicians being invited to go and attend court and come ready with their 40,000 deposit. Do we have reversed apartheid in this South Africa? Is this what we've come to after 30 years? I mean, Fadil is provocative, and Fadil, if he is wrong, he must take everything that comes his way. But why treat Fadil different than all these other criminals that have stolen millions? I haven't seen one of them in a police van, not even Zuma. Thank you for a great show.
Thank you so much for that. I also wondered about the circumstances of it, because part of what I read said that Fadil Adams' attorney had been in contact with the police. So the assertion that police had made, allegedly, that they were not able to reach him, and they had been looking for him and they could not find him at his old address, etc. He denies that is true. He says that my attorney was actually in contact with the police, and I think he had an email to prove that there had been some kind of communication between them. So I did have a couple of questions about why he was taken into custody that way. But you're more than welcome to, in general, tell me about the handling of this case. I wonder, because we've also got Ms. Mashale saying something along the lines of, I actually organized the meeting that Fadil Adams had with the suspect in the Sindiso Magaqa murder. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how he ended up communicating, why he ended up communicating with this individual, and what the nature of their communications were over that murder. 10 o'clock here on SAfm on the Daily Discourse, and Musa has your latest news bulletin.
In our top stories, disaster officials closely monitoring the Garden route and 3 suspected ATM bombers killed. Good morning. The Garden Route District Municipality in the Western Cape says between 35 and 50 millimetres of rain has fallen in the region since yesterday. This as a Category 8 storm made landfall, bringing with it gale force wind and high sea swells. Some municipalities have reported flooding in low-lying areas as well as uprooted trees. The Meyringspoort and Swartberg passes have also been closed due to flooding. Disaster Management Head Gerard Otto.
One of our proactive measures is to emergency breach some of our estuaries. The moment that the level in those estuaries reach a level where we can breach, for that we've got, with the assistance of sandparks, an excavator on standby at the Tow River, as well as an excavator on standby at Swart Vlei. The preparation channel has already been done at Great Brook, and as soon as the tide allows, those breachings would be done to drain these estuaries to avoid flooding of low-lying areas.
In the Eastern Cape, the Department of Transport has confirmed snowfall in several areas in the province. The South African Weather Service has issued severe weather warnings for parts of the province, including heavy rains and snowfall that may disrupt traffic. The Eastern Cape Transport Department spokesperson, Unati Bingoshe, says the snow has not caused any disruptions, but they are monitoring the roads.
Colleagues wish to register that all our mountain passes remain open to traffic. Yes, it is snowing in some parts of the province, particularly your Middelburg, your Graafrenet, Robert Sobukwe now, and Ngumba, formerly Kraddock. We are keeping an eye on those areas, but the snow remains away from the roadway. But should there be a need to close it, we won't think twice, as that will be done in the interest of road users' safety. The only problems that we have relate to flooding, but a full report is coming on that, and the Sarapatman area is the worst affected.
In other news, 3 suspects have been shot dead by the SAPS National Intervention Unit following an ATM bombing in Zeerust in the northwest. Northwest police say the suspects were cornered at their safe house in Makgogwe village in Mahikeng, where a shootout between the police and the suspects occurred. The acting provincial commissioner, Major General Rhino Naidu, is expected to visit the scene in a short while. Lawyers of the National Coloured Congress leader Fadil Adams have arrived at Durban's Westville police station, where he will be processed before his expected court appearance tomorrow. Adams was arrested yesterday by the Political Killing Stars team in Cape Town and is believed to have been transported to KwaZulu-Natal overnight. He is facing allegations of fraud and obstructing the cause of justice in connection with the murder of ANC Youth League leader Sindiso Magaka. Adams' lawyer, Bruce Hendricks.
I would assume that he has not formally been charged. He's been provided with a SAP 14A. That is his notice of rights in terms of the Constitution. However, he must still be processed in respect of the case docket, where they formally warn him of the charges against him, and then only he will be taken to court. So that process must still be followed, and after that he will be taken to court. So experience tells me that unless they do that very quickly this morning, he will be appearing tomorrow.
Cocaine worth approximately 13 million rand has been recovered by police at the Durban port. The KwaZulu-Natal police spokesperson, Robert Nechuhunda, says police were profiling certain vessels following a drug bust in Gauteng in April. That seizure revealed that the drugs were smuggled into the country through the Durban port. Police found 32 blocks of cocaine when a shipment of buses destined for Gauteng was intercepted and searched. The police spokesperson says investigations are continuing.
During an operation which involved officers from the Durban Operational Response Services and Serious Organized Crime Investigations Unit, 32 blocks suspected to be cocaine were recovered concealed in the air conditioning compartment of a bus. The buses were shipped into the country from a South American country and were destined for Gauteng province. Investigations are underway to uncover the suspects behind the shipment and intended recipients.
Recapping the top story, the Garden Route District Municipality in the Western Cape says between 35 and 50 millimeters of rain has fallen in the region since yesterday. This as a Category 8 storm made landfall, bringing with it gale force wind and high sea swells. For SAfm News, I am Anne Musa.
SAfm values your views. Be an active citizen.
When you listen to me, I feel important. When you hug me, I feel safe. When you talk with me, I learn.
Your love and attention helps your child grow strong and confident. Listen, comfort, and connect with him, because every child deserves to feel seen, heard, and loved.
Visit holdmyhand.org.za.
Hey, we buy cars. How does it work if I want to sell my car? We'll drive to your place, you can visit our pod. Even if you don't have space, then at the mall in a parking lot, we've got lots of depots all across the land. Contact me by cars, you're in safe hands. Safe hands.
Wow, that's great.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
The Daily Discourse on SAfm with Joanne Joseph, unpacking the issues that matter. The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
6 minutes past 10 here on the Daily Discourse. Welcome to the second hour of the show with me, Joanne Joseph. Lovely to be with you this morning. And, we've been promising you voter education, and we are going to gradually start ramping that up. And why not start right now? Because this is going to be a long-term conversation that we need to have over the next few months as we head to the polls on the 4th of November. So the next hour is going to be all about elections. And it's also going to talk to not just some of the nitty-gritties and the technical aspects of putting an election together, and what it means for citizens. We're also going to talk about a Human Sciences Research Council piece of research that came through. It showed some rather disturbing trends in terms of the enthusiasm of the electorate around voting in this coming election, also around the kind of systems, the democratic systems that they want to actually see disappear in favor of an autocratic system, which really took me aback when I saw that. So I want to hear from you intermittently as we have this conversation. We've got 4 guests coming up. We're speaking to the IEC. We're speaking to the founder of Elections Management and Consulting Agency of South Africa. We're speaking to Groundwork CEO and founder Mbali Ntuli, whom you will know. She used to be a DA member as well. And we're speaking to Dr. Nkapeli Mqunu, who's senior researcher at the HSRC. So this should give us a fairly rounded view of how exactly we are beginning to approach the election. I'm going to start with that and bring into the conversation Mamaghobo Ramatlodi, Assistant Manager for Civic Education at the Electoral Commission of South Africa. Good morning to you, Mr. Ramatlodi, and thank you for making the time to speak to us today. So voter education begins, voter registration will begin in just a short while. Give me a sense of how the IEC is preparing for what's to come, please.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Good morning to you. Good morning to the co-guests as well as the listeners of SAfm. And really, we appreciate the opportunity to come and share this information with the citizens. With regards to voter education, which is part of our legislative mandate as the Electoral Commission, we have recruited and trained about 900 municipal outreach coordinators who are doing community outreach and mobilization for the upcoming election. Essentially, what this cohort does is they conduct civic and democracy education within communities in the language spoken by the community to ensure that our message is clearly understood. And because we've got a challenge, of youth voter apathy, for the youth targeted programs, we have 2 actually, programs that we have designed specifically to target youth in educational institutions. The first one is the Tertiary Institutions Campaign, targeting the youth in higher education. And the next one is the School Democracy Program, targeting youth in basic education. And the primary objective really, Joanne and the listeners, of these particular, programs is to cultivate a culture of democracy and active citizenry amongst the youth through civic and democracy education as well as voter registration. We believe that when we do this as the Electoral Commission, we will enhance their participation in our electoral processes. In fact, just yesterday, we had 2 meetings with SAWUS as well as SAFETA. SAWUS is the national SRC structure, representing all the SRCs of all universities. It's called the South African Students' Union. So SAFETA then is also a similar structure representing the students in TVET colleges across the country. So we had meetings with these 2 structures to implement our tertiary institutions campaign through collaboration with them, because we really want to maximize our reach and impact where those particular young people are concerned.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't leave those youth that are outside education, employment, or training, the so-called needs. you know. So in June, we've got programs that are targeted for this particular, you know, category of the youth. And in terms of the youth that are, you know, your young professionals, we collaborate with the corporate sector, such as Discovery, the mobile networks, to ensure that also they are not left out, because we realize that, you know, the issue of voter apathy is across all sectors of, you know, of different categories of youth, those that are in employment, those that are in schools, and those that are out of employment or training.
Right.
And we do a lot of work also because we've realized that young people spend a lot of their time on digital platforms, you know, such as your social media platforms, etc. So we do a lot of campaigns to ensure that, you know, we capitalize on that space. Our social media handle is at IEC South Africa. I think we're really hard at work as the Electoral Commission, you know, to ensure that we empower South Africans with credible information, such that their participation in these upcoming elections is meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's really important. One of our listeners has sent us a message, Mr. Khamatloli. He says, "Good day. My pet peeve is, why does the IEC insist on framing the election weekend as the one hit point when online registration has been open all along? Whom does it serve to foster youth apathy regarding voting? My take is online speaks to young people, and they cater more, at least in speech, to others. Myself, I went online and have been voting for a while, and the platform said I'm not registered," says Champ in Bulukwane. Can you? There are two issues there. First of all, let's start with the issue of online, because I think it's a very important one, Mr. Khamatlodi, in terms of how you're reaching the youth. I think you're doing what sounds like great work on the ground, but let's face it, if there's one way you want to reach people, it's through their mobile phones more often than not.
Well, that's correct. You remember that for a couple of years now, we have launched our online voter registration portal. So that has been open, and really we have, you know, had a lot of people that have used this platform to register to vote. However, it is also important to remember that not all South Africans are able to, you know, use technology. So we have to also accommodate those that are not able to use technology through, you know, voter registration weekend. Because with the voter registration weekend, then all our voting stations across the Republic will be opened on the 21st and the 20th of June,
yes,
from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, to ensure that even those that do not have access to technology, or even those that do not have access to your, you know, network, or those that can't even use a phone, for instance, are given an opportunity to register to vote, because registering to vote is a requirement for participating in the election. Whether you participate as a voter or as a candidate, the first requirement is that you must be registered to vote.
Right.
Sure.
Can I ask you just a question on the back of Champ's message? Is there a reason that he would have repeatedly voted and now he would go onto the system and not find his name there as a registered voter?
It is quite weird that I'm not sure what could have happened, Joanne, in that particular case, because once you are registered, you don't have to register every time an election is called, unless your address details have changed.
That's
if you have
important.
moved houses, for instance.
Yeah.
Because you remember that in local government elections, you are required to, in fact, generally, you are required to register where you ordinarily reside, and that is where you are expected to vote when elections are called. So if nothing has changed since your last time of registration, and we have your address details on the National Common Voters Roll, there is really no need for you to re-register when elections are called. I'm not sure really what could have happened in this case, that this person has voted a couple of times, and now for one reason or the other, which is quite strange, I must say, they can't find their name on the National Common Voters Roll.
So would you recommend that they go and re-register on during the registration weekend? Would that be the only way of solving it?
No, that's not the only way of solving it. Actually, they can even visit, because we have an IEC office across all the 257 municipalities nationwide.
Right. Yes.
They don't have to wait for that. They can call our call center, which is 0800 11 8000, and I'm sure our agents will definitely be able to assist in this case. But then they can also visit one of our local IEC offices. Our officials will be more than happy to assist.
Right.
They can also even go on our WhatsApp chat board, because you are able to check your registration details on our WhatsApp chat board, which is on 0600 88 0000. So there are many mechanisms that a person can use to check. If one platform doesn't give you the results, then at least then you can use the other alternatives to ensure that you are 100% sure when you say your name is not on the voter's roll. Definitely the name is not there.
All right. Thank you very much for that. I just want to ask you one last question, because you spoke about the importance of re-registering once you've changed addresses. And
Sure.
I mean, for most people, perhaps that would be a straightforward process. For some, it's not. Voters who live in informal settlements don't always have house numbers. They don't always have road names. How do they go about registering, during the voters' weekend? How do they begin to describe where they live for the purposes of voter registration?
The requirement, Joanne, is that you give us as many particularities of your address details as possible. There are landmarks where people reside. Even
Yes.
if you might not have a house number, there will be landmarks, and with those landmarks, you are able to then identify your location, and that location, because it's somewhere within a municipality, will be located within a VD, and you will then be registered against the VD for which that particular location locates you, in terms of the details you have provided to our officials when you apply for voter registration. So there is no way that you can say that on the basis that I do not have a full or a formal address, therefore, I won't be able to register to vote. Because all of those details around where you reside can be used to determine your location, so that then you are, allocated to the correct segment of the voters roll.
All right. And I want to take a call at this point from one of our listeners, Mr. Khamatlodi. Nhlanhla from Chatsworth, my hometown, is on the line to us. Good morning to you, Nhlanhla. What question do you have for Mr. Khamatlodi?
Good morning, my sister, and good morning to your panels. My sister, I've got questions.
Yes.
Firstly, the duty of SAPC is to promote diversity of views.
Right.
My question is, when does SAPC get to ask the people who don't vote about their views? What are their views? Because I've never heard SAPC asking people who don't vote why they don't vote.
All right. So essentially,
what would make them?
I've done that. I've done exactly that on the show this morning. I opened the lines and I asked exactly those questions. But right now we have Makgabo Khamatlodi with us from the IEC. Do you have a specific question for him that you want to ask?
Yes.
Please go ahead with it.
My second question is, does IEC teach people about democracy? Because democracy comes in different styles. For an example, in South Africa, we've got direct participation, of which that version is a version of ANC, and a version of National Party, checks and balance, representative democracy, pluralistics, and all those things. So for people to gain democracy, they need to know what is democracy first.
Are you asking specifically about party policies, or are you saying does the IEC in general do education on democracy and how we practice it in South Africa according to the law, for example? Is that your question?
Yes, because you can't just come and tell people that they must vote without telling them it's a democratic right.
Quite right. That's a good question. Thank you, Nhlanhla. We'll put that question to Mr. Khamatlodi. How much of an emphasis in terms of the education you're doing is on the democratic system within which we're voting, Mr. Khamatlodi?
Look, at any time, Joanne and the listener, when we are not in an election period, we conduct civic and democracy education, because we are required to have an element of educational substance in the interventions that we do in communities. And intervention is where we would provide civic and democracy education to a minimum of 20 people. So a part of that would be the structures of government, for instance, how democracy works, how important it is for that people participate, what are the implications, for instance, of not participating. So there is that element that is embedded in our civic and democracy education that would address not only voter education, but civic and democracy education, just to ensure that people have an overview and an understanding of how electoral democracy works. So definitely that's part of our civic and democracy education component. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I want to bring into the conversation Lulu White, the founder of Elections Management and Consulting Agency of Africa and a thought leader on elections, democracy and governance in Africa. Ms. White, good morning to you and thank you for making yourself available today. On the back of that question that our listener just asked, there are some basics that I think need to be established. Do South African voters have a good sense of how local government elections are run, what their purpose is and what's achieved with them? Ms. White, do we have you there? Right, we've lost Ms. White for the moment.
Perhaps Joanne, while we are still trying to connect to her, let me just give you this example. Because lately we are saying to South Africans that it is not enough when we do civic and democracy education to just tell people that it is important for them to vote and therefore they must register because that's a requirement. And once they have registered, vote and then and stay away from the system. We say that when people vote, they must understand that they fundamentally constitute government because our votes are translated into seats that form, for instance, in local government, municipal council. So when people don't vote, the country is compelled to formulate government through coalitions.
Right.
And when these coalitions don't work, service delivery gets compromised, leading to the demise of our people. So consequently, when we have low voter turnout, for instance, it becomes difficult to hold anyone accountable because there's no outright winner, and the parties point fingers at each other. So you see, we are not saying to people vote, register to vote, and vote when elections are there, and that's all the information we give them. No. It is important that people also understand that exercising that democratic right to vote is something that you've got to do with responsibility.
Right.
When you put that X on the ballot paper, you are effectively choosing who then becomes government. And that would then determine the quality of life that you would have for the 5-year term of that particular government. So it is important that people have that understanding that it is not just about really putting a cross on the ballot paper.
No, quite right. And I think you're making a very important point there. And let me try and bring Ms. Lulu White back into the conversation now. Ms. White, I hope that your line is functioning right now. And you've heard what Mr. Ramatloli had to say about the issue of voter education and people really understanding why they need to go to the ballot. Do you think that is clear to South Africans, or have they simply lost their enchantment with the idea of voting?
I think nobody has really lost the enchantment with the idea of voting. We do have an older generation that still really much holds on to the views and the importance of voting. And I think that comes from the history that we have experienced in this country where Black people for a long time were not able to vote. So I think we will still see that in terms of trends still coming through. I think in this election, we're going to see, I believe we are going to see a slight turn up, particularly among the youth vote. This is because there's suddenly an understanding among young people, and I think that's driven by these NGOs, the Tutulas and the March in March. You can see there's a lot of activity, even online, that actually shows that young people are starting to find purpose. And I think if political parties are going to be able to drive their campaign strategies around issues as opposed to just slogans, we are likely going to see more and more young people coming to vote. There's a lot of dissent, there's a lot of dissatisfaction, there's a lot of anger, but as if political parties are able to capture the issues that are frustrating to the youth right now, we're definitely going to see an upturn in voting for particularly from young people.
I'm finding what you're saying completely fascinating here, because my perception has been that these movements have formed in response to issues that are really important and close to the hearts of young people, because political parties are not addressing what is close to their hearts. It left me with the impression that actually they have invested their belief in these parties that exist, these movements that exist outside of political parties, because political parties are simply not able to attract them to the ballot box.
That's very true. That's why I actually said that it would be important that political parties in this particular election are able to capture that frustration. Look, if you've looked over the past few months, we've seen young people going to various places of employment in their numbers to look for employment. It's basically shouting out loud to say, give us work, we're looking for work. We've seen the support that March in March is getting. We've seen the support that Operation Dudula is getting. We've seen young people galvanize within the social media spaces and also physically talking to each other to say this is the action that needs to be taken. I think while the IEC is doing voter education as far as making people aware why it's important to vote, I think they also need to find some sort of way of bringing it home that elections, particularly local government elections, are issue-based elections, and that young people need to start identifying issues that relate to them and look for or choose candidates. Because in this particular election, community service, people like civic society and also independent candidates can actually participate, and they can be independent candidates. So I think that is also another message that also needs to start coming out, to say you don't necessarily need to vote for a political party. You can have a member of your civic organization, even if it's not a registered political party, but if you know that that person is a leader in the society and is somebody who is able to speak to your aspirations, you can then put your weight behind him and vote for that person or vote for those particular people. And I think that is a message that also needs to start echoing out, because currently, you are correct to say young people seem to think that voting is only applicable if they are voting for a political party, and that message needs to be debunked.
Right. Yeah, talk to us a little bit more about this emergence of independent candidates who've been allowed to run for a couple of years now. How has the presence of these individuals changed the election landscape, or has it not changed the landscape quite enough yet?
Look, I think with local government elections, there's always been independent candidates have always been allowed to participate in local government elections, because those are ward-based, those are issue-based, so they're individual-based. So a person within a particular ward is able to contest, and it's always been there since the beginning of time. However, while they are there, because of the fact that in these municipal councils, when they have issues that pertain to their particular communities, they do not get enough. They cannot galvanize enough support from within the council. So what would happen is then you'll find them bargaining for space and for expression within their wards so that they are able to deliver services. And if however, we are to have a situation where we have more than one independent candidate participating, then those independent candidates would then be able to plug together, and they would then support each other among the issues that actually pertain to their wards as independent. They're likely to have much more power. So while the structure is there for people to be able to participate and to nominate independent candidates, the power struggle they still have to face comes in council, when they have to then bargain for, whatever it is that they want. As you do know, larger political parties, when they get to council, they're able to pass whatever resolutions and whatever it is that they want for their own communities without much need for convincing. As long as they have the majority, they're able to do that. But independent councillors suffer because they do not have that level of support.
You're mentioning some really important aspects that cluster around the story of local government elections here. You're hearing the voice there of Lulu White, founder of Elections Management and Consulting Agency of Africa. And Ms. White, I'm going to ask you to stay with us so we can keep chatting to you in the next half hour. And before that, you heard the voice of the IEC representative on the program today, Magabo Gamatloli, Assistant Manager for Civic Education at the Electoral Commission of South Africa. We're going to take a short break to get your latest news headlines, after which I'm going to take some of your voice notes and let's have some conversations with the experts we have on the program talking about voter education.
Thank you, Joanne, on the news headlines on SAfm. I am Onde Lambana, and a very good morning. 2 police officers from the tactical response team have been killed in a single motor vehicle crash in Emalahleni in Mpumalanga.
3 suspects have been shot dead by SAPS's National Intervention Unit following an ATM bombing in Zerast in Northwest. And the Guardian Route District Municipality in the Western Cape says between 35 and 50 millimeters of rain has fallen in the region since yesterday. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Stay tuned to SAfm coming up.
Is your business struggling with cash flow, job losses, or low productivity? You're not alone. Productivity SA's Business Turnaround and Recovery Program provides expert turnaround strategies to restructure operations, save jobs, and boost growth. Get practical tools like early warning systems, performance improvement plans, and access to productivity champions. Visit productivitysa.co.za or call 011-848-5318 to apply now. Your recovery starts here.
EFC is live this Thursday. 2 athletes at the height of their powers fight for more than victory. They fight for the fight itself. Zakir Badat, 8 wins, all finishes. Zico Makangela, 5 wins, 5 knockouts. Champion and former champion collide in Africa's biggest welterweight championship fight. EFC 133, live from the World Sports Betting Arena. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
No one gets fit overnight. It takes discipline, and your money is no different. A Nedbank 32-day notice account helps you build financial strength with up to 7.3% interest and 0 maintenance fees. The higher the deposit, the higher the return. Invest in under 2 minutes on the Money app and get money fit with Nedbank. For more information, go to nedbank.co.za. See money differently. Nedbank, we're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
You are listening to Joanne Joseph on SAfm.
10:32 here on the Daily Discourse. We're having an interesting conversation about the issue of elections. Now that the election date of the 4th of November has been declared, a lot of energy will go into preparing the country for the local government elections. And as always, as the Electoral Commission has just told us on the show, it wants to see as many previous voters as possible returning and new voters registering for the first time. But as the Daily Mavericks pointed out, it may not be as easy as it sounds getting people to the ballot box this time. There seems to be a measure of disillusionment with the country's leadership in many spheres, and that raises a question around whether it'll affect voter numbers. So I want to drill down to some of these dynamics. We've got some really interesting analysts on the line to us right now. Joining us on the line is Dr. Nkapeli Mkunu, Senior Researcher at the Human Sciences Research Council. They carried out a recent piece of research that we want to talk about. Lulu White, founder of Elections Management and Consulting Agency of Africa, is also on the line to us. And I want to explore, because we are going to be joined in a short while by Mbali Ntuli, CEO and founder of the Groundwork Collective. I want to just explore what was discovered in this research that the HSRC carried out. And let me quickly bring in our guest, Mr. Mkunu, to speak about this. Good morning, and thank you for your time in the program, Dr. Mkunu. First of all, you've carried out this election survey for the Independent Electoral Commission. And what does it tell you about how conducive the current electoral climate is to a high voter turnout on the 4th of November?
Yes, a very good morning to you and the listeners. Also, warm greetings to my fellow panelists. So the HSRC and the IEC have been conducting research pertaining to voter sentiments for the past 2 decades. This particular study is one of many others that we actually conduct. It's called the Voter Participation Survey. So we conduct this research every pre-election year. So, of course, on the 4th of November, we've got the local government elections. So then we conducted the VPS at the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. So essentially, we try and get an understanding of voter sentiment heading into an election. For example, we look at matters of satisfaction with how democracy is working, trust in institutions, assessing and evaluating the performance of the Electoral Commission as an EMB, an electoral management body. And one of the more worrying findings we have ended up coming across in our research is that increasingly South Africans are expressing dissatisfaction with how democracy is working. South Africans are not necessarily feeling hopeful regarding the future of democracy, and that is predominantly because of the worsening socio-economic conditions that many South Africans speak to. So by that, I'm referring to matters of service delivery, perceptions of corruption, unemployment, and all the bread and butter issues that South Africans grapple with on a daily basis.
Are you saying that they've lost faith in democracy and they're actually opting for a different kind of system of government that they would prefer to see take hold in this country?
Yes, so, and this is the part that requires a bit of unpack and careful nuance. So, of course, as a preferred form of governance, as South Africa, democracy is what we have been subscribing to since 1994. However, what we have started seeing is that patterns of dissatisfaction are beginning to grow. So we are seeing less people who believe that democracy is the preferable forms of government, but we're also seeing an increase in people who say one of two things. One, it does not matter whether we've got a democracy or any other form of government. Two, those who say that non-democratic forms of government, so potential totalitarian and authoritarian forms of government may actually be more preferable. But we must understand that those evaluations, worrying as they may be, are simply linked to the fact that for the most part, generally South Africans have lost faith in democracy. They are not as hopeful as they were within the first decade of democracy between 1994 and 2004. This is a trend we've seen continuously for the past decade or so. And when you monitor the change, you begin to see that, one, it is cross-generational. Two, it is also associated with declining trust in core institutions, such as national government, local governments as the sphere closest to the people as far as service delivery goes. So those kinds of institutions are losing the faith or the trust of citizens, and that is ultimately affecting the overall evaluation of democracy.
That's a little bit shocking to me, I have to admit, Dr. Mkuno. I want to bring into the conversation Lulu White, founder of Elections Management and Consulting Agency of Africa. Before I let you go, Ms. White, I'm a bit taken aback by this idea that democracy has potentially, or the implementation of the kind of democracy we have seen in our country has led certain voters potentially to saying we'd rather have an autocratic or authoritarian governance system than democracy, because, it doesn't matter whether we have democracy or not, we don't have access to the freedoms, perhaps the equality, dignity, freedom that a democracy guarantees. What do you think about that, Ms. White?
Look, I agree with what he's saying, in a sense that if you look at how young people in this country actually celebrate what has happened in Burkina Faso and what has happened in Chad and what has happened in Mali, you can tell that comes from a frustration. And that frustration, I'm not certain whether it's made by the fact that people don't understand that because I think the challenge that we are facing is that people seem to think that after election, then the work is done, right? And that's why I'm always advocating for civic education and voter education, because then after voter education and elections take place, there needs to be an education that also shows people that when services are not being met, delivery of services is not happening, there are certain things that you are supposed to do as a community to force the leadership that you've got in place to actually take accountability and deliver the services that they promise to you. So what then happens is that we have people that are elected, you've got a leadership that is not responsive, that is not taking care of the needs of the people, and then you end up with a group of people that are frustrated and they end up going for protests in the streets instead of actually finding mechanisms and ways within a democratic dispensation to hold their leadership accountable so that they deliver the much required services that they are asking for. So I do not dispute what he's saying. Mr. Mkuno is correct. That is the reason why you see countries such as Burkina Faso are being celebrated by young people, because they're saying if that can at least give us the type of economic freedom that we need, ownership of our resources that we need, and we can self-determine as a country, we would rather than have that than to have a fast democracy. Because clearly, the democracy that we're experiencing in South Africa is starting to appear as if it's a farce.
Thank you very much for your input, Ms. Lulu White, founder of Elections Management and Consulting Agency of Africa. Let's bring into the conversation Mbali Ntuli, CEO and founder of Groundwork Collective. Ms. Ntuli, I think we're all a little shocked that the respondents in this particular survey have actually said to the HSRC, we don't particularly care whether this is a democracy or not. We will opt for more authoritarian types of governance because it really doesn't make a difference to our lives, what is happening in this country and the way it's being run. I mean, is this something that shocks you, or is it something that we should have anticipated was going to happen given the implementation of the democratic norms, conventions and rights by those in power?
Thanks, Joanne, and good morning to you and the panel and obviously all the listeners. Not at all. So the work that we do at Groundwork Collective is specifically around civic education because we think that it is a foundational gap that we have in our country. And this is why for us it's not also just an election cycle issue, it's an ongoing issue. So we deal quite a lot with a lot of the reports from the HSRC, Afrobarometer, we do our own focus grouping, and it's been very evident to us for some time that we are expecting democratic participation, but we haven't actually invested in making sure that people democratically understand and have political knowledge, normative values, know how to mobilize civically or in communities through participation and through using the many parts of the state that are there for us to participate. And so what we're seeing now is the culmination of deep mistrust in institutions, unmet needs, which are then made to be unmet democratic needs. And in fact, what you'll see also in the data is that 79% of South Africans say they've never received voter education or civic education. So that's really where we start to have the first problem. The second is then compounded by just the general societal conditions that all of us are unsatisfied with general economic conditions. And the people that bear the brunt of it the most are the ones that are opting out of democracy because it's easier in some ways to actually get responses from protest action. So we have high protest participation, but very low electoral participation. And we haven't made enough of a link, particularly to young people, why getting part or taking part in the democratic process is actually good for them. And of course, it becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy. If you opt out of the system, then you don't know what to do. You feel powerless, you protest. But the people that actually do go up and show up and then do it in between elections to hold political actors accountable are the ones that get the most out of the democratic process. So we need to have a fundamental shift in South Africa, how we are approaching this, because we can't even begin to start to reimagine whether the kind of democracy we have in totality is everything that we want, because so few of us don't actually know what's happening. And I'll just say one thing about the upcoming elections. I think it's very interesting because people always say, municipal services are so close to people's hearts and the everyday daily lived lives, but what we see in voting is actually the opposite in this country. In the last 2021 elections, 21 provinces had a 50% turnout, and that shows that there's also a crisis in our municipal turnout, and it's linked to the everyday participation systems that people aren't getting. And so where you would think that more South Africans would vote and come out in numbers, that actually doesn't happen in our country. And it's very worrying when you look at the fact that we had 45% really in the last elections of a turnout that came out. And I don't think, unless there's going to be an increased whole of society approach to making sure that people understand fundamentally what they can do and what they can do after the elections to hold politicians accountable, that we're going to get any change.
That ongoing voter education is such an important thing, and I just want to draw attention to something that you actually posted on social media. You made an interesting point. Has everyone realized that as per the Municipal Structures Amendment Act, if there's no majority, then councils would have to go into an exco system. This is not new for KZN as the only province that has it, but I suspect most voters don't know this going into the election. And as you say, it's part of the nitty-gritties of the education process, getting down to the kind of the essentials that people just have never learnt about. Would you just briefly explain to us what you were speaking about here in regard to this amendment?
Of course. So there's currently a bill that is for the Municipal Amendment Structures Act. And part of that bill, and there's a number of different things there, but part of I'll just say three of the big things that people should be looking out for is that if any council does not get a majority, so a party doesn't get 50% plus one, the bill would support that it would then become an exco system. That means that in the rest of the country, except for KZN, you're used to having a mayor that then has a mayoral committee and will choose, who's the mayoral committee on this and economic development, etc. And that's how they govern. In an exco system, however, the executive system means that each party gets a proportionality of their votes to get a person onto the exco. So an exco of 10, if your party got a certain number of votes, you might then have 2 seats on the exco. Both of these systems have pros and cons. Obviously, as I said, in KZN, this has been what has been the way that municipalities have run for a long time. And in some places, it's going to do the opposite of what this bill is trying to do. This is also known as a coalitions bill, and it's trying to stabilize coalitions in municipalities because everyone's realized that we're going to have them for the future now in most cases. And the bill is intention to try and stabilize coalitions by having, one, this particular thing, force parties to have to work together, although, of course, it can cause the exact same problem we have now by really splintering the executive. The second part of this bill also talks to that we would now introduce thresholds. So previously, you could be a political party that would be able to stand in a municipality. You didn't have to get a certain amount of percentage, but you could always be able to get some seats or a seat. Now, this bill would say that you need to get at least 1% of the vote in order to be able to qualify to get a seat. Again, there's probably going to be a lot of conversations on the constitutionality of that, but whether people think it's a good thing or a bad thing, people just need to actually know so they can participate in the conversation and also know that when they do go to elections, because the bill would have been tabled, what the outcome could look of the way that they vote. And then there's a number of other things that are there. But I think those two are the ones that are most important for people to even be grappling with and participating in the conversation, because it could fundamentally change what that looks like. For example, in SAfm, if this had been implemented in the last elections, we would have gone from 14 parties to 5 parties. And, again, people can decide for themselves what that looks like and if they are for it or not. But we should be having the conversation and we're not.
But there has been the perception that particularly in local government, small parties just don't effect any positive change. The coalitions, the movement in and out of them just plays havoc with services in the city.
I would argue that there's also a leadership crisis that we have in South Africa, and that we can't legislate for every single thing like this, and that there could have been much other ways that people could have come together in coalitions. But also, why is it always that people believe that small parties aren't doing their work? If I have a particularly great rates association chairperson who wants to run on a particular issue to get rates or tariffs down, and he happens to get a seat, and that's his sole issue, it's a single issue-based party, I think they should just have as much of a seat at the table as the huge big parties, because we've also seen when the huge big parties have had their majority that they also haven't actually done what they're supposed to be doing. And so I think it's a very easy way for people to scapegoat new emergent and new entrants into the political sphere. And what it actually will do is cause a situation like we see across the pond, where you start to have the bigger parties disproportionately even get bigger by saying that we don't want small parties to engage. And I'm not convinced by the argument that just because it's happened a few times that every small party doesn't have a potential role to play if they actually get the citizens to vote for them. And I think there's also another way that we could go about this threshold, which would be a soft threshold and still allow them to have proportional seats so that those citizens that voted for them still have some say, even if it doesn't mean that they occupy a ward seat or can occupy maybe an executive seat. That I think we could live with. But to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think only really serves to help the bigger parties in this particular sense.
That's very interesting indeed. I'm going to take a call now from Emmanuel in KwaZulu-Natal. You want to talk about youth and voting, Emmanuel? Good morning.
Good morning, Mama.
I'm well, thanks. Go for it.
All right. I would like to lay a comment when it comes to voting. As youth, I believe that when it comes to education, we are not taught really what elections are all about.
Yeah.
And most importantly is when it comes to the systems, we have communism, we have democratic. So now all these options, they can even confuse us because we are not well taught on each and every individual system that is out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from this point moving forward, the youth, we are the ones who are the future. So we are the ones who need to be taught about these systems, put them out there, because what I've seen, I'm not that old, but what I've seen violence and division.
Right.
To the youth.
Yeah.
But now, as we are approaching elections, instead of just campaigning, teach youngsters on when it comes to these systems so that they fully understand what style of governance they want.
Yes.
And options that are out there.
I love that. I love that call. Emmanuel, thank you so much. You've said something really important here because, Ms. Mtuli, this is something that's been going round and round in my head as I was listening to you and the other gentlemen speak. That you know, the education, voter education is one thing. It's one thing to be able to say, you know, you need to go and register and then you go and vote and this is how many ballot boxes there will be and you will be putting a one into each box. I mean, that has its value. And it has its place and it's important in the process. But I think what I'm hearing from Emmanuel here is that there's a lack of general political education in regard to why we've implemented the system, how it works. And I don't know where it starts. Does it start at school level? Not everybody goes to university and chooses politics as a major. But how does the average person just access this kind of information and digest it?
Absolutely. So there's a difference between voter education and civic education to the point that, yourself and both Emmanuel have made. And the voter education is really on the mechanics of how to vote mainly versus civic, which includes political knowledge, normative values, civic participation, how to understand, the levers of powers that you should be moving. And so for us, we've actually are piloting in schools because we think it's disingenuous to say to an 18-year-old, hey, you've turned 18, go out and vote, when you've given no foundation of anything, really. And I say this across the board. I think Mr. Mkhulu said this is cross-generational. It is, and it's cross-class, it's cross-race, where you have so many people saying they've never, ever, done anything to do with this. We're going to a municipal election in November. How many people that are listening to you right now have gone to the ID process? How many are going to go to the budget consulting? Do they even know what that is? Are they part of ward committees? These are things that we should make a part and parcel of our curriculum as far as we're concerned at GWC, which is why we're trying to pilot it in a number of schools so that we have children from 16. We register them, we take them on an intensive 2-year civic education journey, and then by the time they're ready to actually vote, they become lifelong voters and they actually understand how to participate meaningfully in the democratic process. And we need to be doing that everywhere as much as possible. So I absolutely agree with that. And I mean, I would also add that there are other ways that people can start getting involved. Certainly organizations like my own, we also do observers. We encourage South Africans to sign up with us so that they can actually see on election day what actually happens. And usually we also find that that's something that hooks people to continue keep wanting to have more information. So it's not as though people are being lazy. It's very hard to access and get through dense legislation. You need organizations that have been able to distill it, and there are several in South Africa, but I would say that we need to do it as a societal thing, and I would lobby strongly to put it into schools.
I think I totally agree with you on that. There's so much value in teaching our children how to exercise democracy and how to be active citizens in one. One of our listeners says the problem that we are missing here is the cause of voter apathy. It is not that voters do not understand why we have to vote every period, but it is that our vote, or rather the people who are elected, are bad leaders, incompetent and corrupt. I would advise that instead of voter education, we do candidates education. I suppose that that is what political political parties and independent candidates will be doing during this election. It's their duty individually to tell you what they have on offer. But, Ms. Nduli, I'm interested to know, there are organizations on the ground like yours, right? There are civil society organizations that are doing this work. But I would argue it's not just your work. This is the work that should have been it should have penetrated the education system on all levels a long time ago. And it's ongoing work that the media should be involved in, and certainly that government should be driving. Are we seeing these campaigns? Are we not accessing them in the right places? Or is there in general just not enough education, civic education available to young South Africans and to middle-aged and older South Africans, all of whom are voting? And I speak not just from the point of view of voting systems and the democratic system, but also the Constitution and constitutional values.
Absolutely. I think it's a combination of everything you've said. And I want to just give this statistic because a lot of people like to look at, countries like Sweden and talk about their happiness index and how great their participation is. They have one of the highest voting participations in the world, as well as have very civically engaged citizens, I think about 80%. And as a result, their politicians don't need bodyguards because people know how to get them out when they don't do what they need to do. And I think what people sometimes forget in this conversation is we're not going to get good political parties or good political leaders and a great economy that's going to grow if we as citizens aren't prepared to do this hard work, quite frankly, because there's no incentive on any political party to have to do better than what they are doing now, because they know that voters and citizens aren't participating enough to hold them to account in the various different ways that they can. So I want to make sure that people also understand that even if we did candidate selections and we knew everyone who it was in the political parties, it really requires enough of us being empowered and physically minded and engaged to force those political parties to be scared of us as citizens. That's how you get a good democracy. That's how you're going to vote them out. And I'm hoping that even though we haven't done enough of it in the last 30 years, this is something that we're going to be doing far more as a country and that everyone's going to realize is important. And I also think that we need to do it in ways that are interesting and fun. It can't all be people standing up and lecturing people on this. So again, there's lots of organizations that I think are doing this in really cool and fun and accessible ways. Even as a parent, you can get that information and start having these conversations even with your children. I don't think you even have to wait for the education system because that could take years. But the things that I said earlier, how many of us are going to council meetings? How many of us are participating in our ward committees? How many of us take part in the IDP? Mine was yesterday in Durban. It was at 11 a.m. So just already, I think we have to even have a conversation with our municipal planners. There's no way that you're going to get people that are either in jobs or looking for jobs to be able to go and participate in that event at 11 a.m. So we need to have a shift again, and just in terms of how we are making it as accessible as possible for citizens to be involved. Otherwise, it becomes tick box exercises, and we end up with the mess that we're in now. But I think if we can turn this corner, and certainly we've got about 100,000 people now that we have taken through this process, and we hope to have 500,000 by 2029, that could fundamentally shift what our politics could look like if you have that many people that are engaged and understand the system and know how to work it to get the best out for them.
Yeah, and we need to give that due consideration. Thank you for all your input and your expertise into that. Mbali Ntuli, CEO and founder of the Groundwork Collective. I'm going to give you the last say and a very quick one, please, Dr. Nkunu. Your last say to the public of South Africa. What do you have to say to people in regard to this the upcoming election, particularly those who are feeling disenchanted and apathetic?
Sure. Thank you very much. So two things, really. The first is that we need to be careful around the framing relating to voter apathy. And the reason we ought to be careful is because when you look at the civic duty to vote, or whether or not citizens have a duty to vote, it still remains relatively high. It's one of the higher indicators. Yes, it has declined over the past couple of years, but I think as of 2025, it was sitting at over 60%. So there is that recognition that there is a civic duty for citizens to exercise their rights and vote. Secondly, we must also try and make sure that we are able to listen and understand what the voters are saying. The vast majority of citizens who cite political disillusionment as reason for their political inactivity. That mostly has to do with the bread and butter issues we spoke about earlier on. It has very little to do with registration processes or any other bureaucratic form of partaking in elections. So we do need to monitor that carefully. And then the last point would be, of course, citizens must be encouraged, and this is not the responsibility of one or two organizations. Ms. Dooley usually says that politics is a contact sport, meaning that if you are going to engage in politics and democracy as a whole, you cannot avoid a potential contact simply because of that's how the system is designed. That's the nature of the beast.
Right.
But for citizens to raise their concerns and express their views and exercise their hard-won rights, the best way to do that is to register and partake in elections.
I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ngapeli Mkuno, Senior Researcher at the HSRC. Your news bulletin now with Ondela Mbana. It's 11 o'clock here on the Daily Discourse.
Thank you, Joanne. On the top stories, emergency teams on the ground in Gocha municipality after heavy downpours and 2 police officers from the tactical response team killed. For SAfm News, I'm Ondela Mbana and a very good morning. The Gocha municipality in the Eastern Cape says emergency teams are working around the clock after heavy overnight rains triggered flooding in parts of the region. About 100 millimeters of rain fell, with human stop among the hardest hit areas, forcing evacuations and leaving several residents in need of shelter and aid. Mayor Hatting Bondman says emergency teams are on the ground.
Our teams have been clearing blocked storm water and so forth over the last few days. We know the areas that usually flood, and our teams are on standby and making sure that we have people ready to act as and when areas are flooded. So we're doing everything that we can. We're really thankful for the rain, obviously, because our dam levels are extremely low. So while being thankful for the rain, we have to make sure that we protect our infrastructure, we protect the lives of our residents, and therefore we're really working hard to make sure that we are ready for the rain that is beautifully falling.
The Garden Route District Municipality in the Western Cape says between 35 and 50 millimeters of rain has fallen in the region since yesterday. This as a Category 8 storm made landfall, bringing with it gale force wind and high sea swells. Some municipalities have reported flooding in low-lying areas as well as uprooted trees. The Meringspoorte and Swartbeck passes have also been closed due to flooding. Disaster Management Head Gerard Otto says preparations are also underway to open up estuaries to avoid flooding.
One of our proactive measures is to emergency breach some of our estuaries. The moment that the level in those estuaries reach a level where we can breach, for that we've got, with the assistance of Sandparks, an excavator on standby at the Tow River, as well as an excavator on standby at Swartvlei. The preparation channel has already been done at Great Brook, and as soon as the tide allows, those breachings would be done to drain these estuaries to avoid flooding of low-lying areas.
2 police officers from the tactical response team have been killed in a single motor vehicle crash in Madlanga in Madlanga. They were travelling to Pretoria to testify in cases before court when the driver lost control of the state vehicle they were travelling in. The 2 officers were part of the Manguzi task team in KwaZulu-Natal, where they were actively involved in combating cross-border crimes. Police spokesperson Athlenda Mate.
The Acting National Commissioner, Lieutenant General Dimpani, has extended heartfelt condolences to the bereaved families and friends of the deceased members. The names of the deceased will be released once all immediate family members have been informed. The SAPS Employee Health and Wellness Unit have been dispatched to provide psychosocial services to the families and colleagues of the members.
3 suspects have been shot dead by SAPS's National Intervention Unit following an ATM bombing in Zeerust in Northwest. According to Northwest Police, the suspects have been cornered at their safe house in Mahowe village in Mahigeng, where a shootout between the police and the suspects occurred. Acting Provincial Commissioner Major General Rhino Naidu is expected to visit the crime scene in a short while. The U.S. tech giant Apple has agreed to pay $250 to settle a class action lawsuit accusing it of misleading millions of iPhone buyers over artificial intelligence upgrades to its Siri voice assistant. Apple did not admit any wrongdoing but agreed to a deal that will resolve the claims. Recapping the top story, the Gqoga municipality in the Eastern Cape says emergency teams are working around the clock after heavy overnight rains triggered flooding in parts of the region. I am Ondelambana for SAfm News, headlines at 11:30.
Are we ready for a real conversation? SAfm, leading the conversations that move us. As we celebrate 90 years of existence, SAfm takes you back to the voices that shaped a nation.
Berea, the home of the four bespectacled Tisson brothers, all of whom work or have worked on the English service, particularly Audio Mix and Radio Today. Watch how the night proceeds towards dawn.
And
I need a lot of consoling when I started the early program. People couldn't believe that John O'Donnell and B. Reid were chosen for the early morning program, because if ever two announcers used to want to swap a morning shift for an afternoon shift, John and I would do it.
90 years of trusted voices. This is SAfm.
With the ever-changing financial landscape, it can be difficult to make sense of all the moves at times. Join me, Jimmy Moyaha, on the SAfm Market Update with MoneyWeb, Mondays to Thursdays, 6 to 7 p.m, as we break down the key market trends, top financial stories, and smart investment insights, all in one place. It's everything you need to stay financially informed ahead of the curve.
The Daily Discourse on SAfm with Joanne Joseph, unpacking the issues that matter. The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
6 minutes past 11, we're into the third and final hour of the Daily Discourse with me, Joanne Joseph. Lovely to have been with you. And such an interesting input from our election experts, from the IEC to those working with civil society organizations, who are telling us that voter education is one very important aspect before we go to the polls on the 4th of November, but also learning the tenets of democracy. What are the building blocks of democracy? And how important is it to start integrating an understanding of those and of the kind of citizens that we want to build in the future? It occurred to me as Mbali Ntuli was speaking. She's, of course, the CEO of Groundwork Collective, and she was saying, you know, we need to integrate the civic education into our children's lives in every way. We need to be talking to them about it as parents. They need to be accessing it at school level and in so many other media and in so many other platforms with which they engage. But I was also thinking that part of the reason that people are possibly so disillusioned is that the kind of people we have grown into the politicians we have today are not the people we want to see running the country in many ways. And that's where I think some of the voter apathy comes from, because clearly there is a problem. People are disillusioned with the current leaders, and they're leaders in all spheres, not just government, the three phases of government. Yes, that's one aspect, but also, in political parties, in civil society, the kind of leaders that we have grown perhaps don't talk to our hearts and what we want to see done in this country in terms of governance. And I think if we are going to achieve that, we need to start working towards a situation where we actually grow the kind of politicians we want to see. We grow people who are schooled in democracy. Let's listen to one or two of your voice notes, and then shortly after that we're going to be catching up with financial advisor Brian Hirsch.
Good morning, Joanne, and morning to the SAfm listeners. It's Mfundo from Durban. One thing I realized when it comes to voter apathy in this country that we're experiencing is based on one significant point, is that our democracy can be easily bought by the powers that be. We're looking at the political funding model and who's funding who and why. And also the most important thing is we're looking at the way, the slow pace of change, and it's designed specifically for that not too much disruption must happen to the status quo, and hence why people are saying there's no use for voting at all.
Thank you so much for that input. We'll keep taking your voice notes and we'll take some of your calls as well on that issue a little bit later on in the program. Right now, financial advisor Brian Hirsch joins us. He is from Colley and Associates. And of course, you know that once a week we catch up with Brian and he talks us through some important aspects of financial well-being. And this week, we're talking to Brian about how to build a financial plan, ensure a secure future for peace of mind, especially in your retirement, as far away as that may be. Brian, good morning to you. Always good to have you on the program. And I've broken this down into steps, Brian. So I want to ask I want to start with some of the basic building blocks here of building a sound financial plan. And if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the issue of learning to budget, first of all. Good morning.
Well, lovely, because very simply, people are either financially organized or totally disorganized. And most people are totally disorganized. They can't even tell you how much money they've got in the bank. They don't know exactly what it costs them every month. Yeah. They don't budget for the extras that come up all the time. I mean, my wife gives me this list at the end of the month. She says, this is what I've spent. And then I turn over the page, and these are all the extras. So it's very important that one understands how do you become financially organized. You need to do that budget. The most important critical document you will ever prepare, other than your will, which I'll talk about shortly, is that budget. Right. What are your standing charges? Charles Dickens, in one of his, says that a man who earns £1 and spends 19 and sixpence is a rich man, and a man who spends a guinea and only earns £1. And for those who don't know what a guinea is, it's 1 shilling more than £1 is a poor man. And it's very important that one understands what you need to do. And there are principles, and it's not that complicated. The first principle is financial. And by the way, if anyone doesn't get this and they'd like to get hold of me, we'll give my site at the end, and I can always send them the 10 principles. The first principle is financial knowledge and understanding. And this is probably the most critical, because people are sold products. In South Africa, people don't go out and buy products, they are sold products, and they don't always understand what they're doing, and then they find they run out of money, so maybe we'll give up this product, or we'll give up this investment, or we'll stop this life policy. So important to be financially and not have financial knowledge. And if you don't understand, I've always made the comment, you can never ask a stupid question, but you can only get a stupid answer. So make sure you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, whether you're buying life insurance, whether you're making an investment, understand the implications and the consequences of investments that go up and down. So I talk about financial knowledge. Ask questions. Don't go blindly into any investment. The second principle is premature death. What happens if you die and you haven't catered for your family? I spoke last week about debt, spoke about school fees, and I spoke about the importance of understanding, should something happen to you, what happens to your family, how do they live? The third principle is also saving for retirement. Retirement may be a long way, and in most cases it is a long way away, and therefore understand what do you need to put away so that you can somehow match your budget at retirement, taking into account obviously inflation, and understand where you are in that road. It's a long road, retirement is a long way away, and it's very important that you understand that. The next principle is very much healthcare and disability. Now let me share this with you. When people reach retirement, their savings will probably stop because they won't need to be saving and drawing money from a fund. They probably will have no more, a lot of expenses will fall away. The one expense that will not fall away will be healthcare. And let me share something about healthcare. At an 8% inflation rate, increase in healthcare on a yearly basis, you will be paying double in 9 years' time, and again double on that figure 9 years' time. So in 9 years, if you're spending 5,000 now, it's going to cost you 10, and another 9 years later is going to cost you 20. So it's important. Healthcare goes with not only with spending, but it talks about your health. And that is, for me, one of the most important principles, because when you most need your health care, getting closer to retirement, that's when you suddenly find you can't afford it.
Right.
What's also critical now in South Africa is big change. I think back to my father and my sister. My father wanted my sister to be a doctor, accountant, to marry an accountant, doctor, or a lawyer. And now today, families want their daughters and sons to become accountants, doctors, and lawyers. So there's double income funds. Our marriages, 1 in 3 marriages don't survive, and it's very important that each partner has their own financial plans, and one needs to understand, even if you think that, your wife is working but looking after the children, something happens to your wife, who's going to look after the children, who's going to care for them, how's it going to affect your career, so that you need to consider. The next thing is understanding growth versus income. Growth assets have risk. Income assets, you want certainty and security. So it's important that you plan accordingly in terms of your requirements in setting down a financial plan. You also need to understand risk. I mean, they say the greater the risk, the greater the reward. That's actually a lie, because in many people's cases, the greater the risk they take, they lose all their money. So don't go invest into situations that sound too good to be true, because the chances are, if they sound too good to be true, they are too good to be true. Next principle is diversification. You need to be diversified. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. You need to diversify between different asset classes. They are made up of equities, property, cash in the bank, alternative investments, as well as retirement funds. And then for me, we've developed a booklet that many people have used. It's called the Anchor Life File. And this, because in life, there are so many, we never know about premature death. And life is unpredictable, but your estate planning doesn't have to be. This file is designed to help you organize, update, and record key financial and legal information, making it easier for you and your loved ones to manage your estate both now and in the future. And the checklist, all the things you need to do, what is important, keeping your will, your ID documents, naturally all the passwords today, and a list of all your assets and liabilities, your title deeds, where are they, your bank accounts, everything you need. And if anyone wants it, we've got it online, we'll let you have it. It's a guide to what you need to put together in legal documents. And those legal documents, starting with the most important, is your will. Remember, Joanne, you and I can have an agreement, we can have a disagreement, we can go to law. But the will is the one document when you die, the only person you can argue with is now deceased.
Right.
So you need to have a will. And 80% of South Africans do not have a will, which means maybe the little bit of assets may be just a car or may go to the wrong people. Get yourself a will. Mm-hmm. And it can be a simple type of will, but at least it explains, if you've got trust, where are those trust documents, what's in the trust, and all those other documents that are vital in winding up estates. To wind up an estate today can take anything between 1 and 5 years.
Absolutely.
And if you've got all the information in a file that everyone knows where it is and can give it to whoever the executor is, it'll speed up the whole process. And those really are the principles. Death too soon, premature death, saving for retirement, healthcare disability, double income families, the importance of growth versus income, understanding risk, diversification, and then having all your records in one place. So often, I deal with so many estates and you can't find half the documents. Mm. So please, if anyone wants a copy of the Life File, the Anchor Life File, my address is www.bhca.co.za. We'll gladly send it to you.
Brian, thank you for that. I'm going to ask you to stay with us. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll build some questions around what you've had to say to us already.
EFC is live this Thursday. 2 athletes at the height of their powers fight for more than victory. They fight for the fight itself. Zakir Badat, 8 wins, all finishes. Zico Makengela, 5 wins, 5 knockouts. Champion and former champion collide in Africa's biggest welterweight championship fight. EFC 133, live from the World Sports Betting Arena. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
Clientele is here to safeguard you and your family with compassion because life happens. Be part of a family that truly cares. Our funeral dignity plans have helped South Africans bury their loved ones with dignity for more than 30 years. Let us help you create a meaningful tribute that honors your life and those of your loved ones. We pay out within 24 hours and you will get double accident cover with a clientele funeral plan. Our plans are affordable. Pick the option that suits your needs. Easy to apply, no medical examinations and no paperwork. SMS SAfm to 48031. That's 48031. Clientele Life is an authorized FSP and licensed life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
20 minutes past 11 here on the Daily Discourse. Yes, indeed, we are speaking to Brian. And one of the issues he's been speaking about is the importance of keeping a will. And Brian, I have to tell you, this was something that, in your moments of grief, when you lose someone you love, having that file that you can reach for, because nobody tells you about the administration surrounding death, right? And how painful that can be in addition to the grief that you are experiencing. But if you've got that file, if you have put everything into it, including a will, you make that experience so much less painful for your family members. Brian, I just want to listen in to a voice note from one of our listeners who has a question for you.
Good morning, it's Bev. What happens if you've got a will, it's with the bank, but it's not signed? So it was obviously one of those wills sent by the bank and the person didn't sign it and the bank stored it. They would have received it, seeing there wasn't a signature. I mean, would that be allowed? Should they have done that? Should they have allowed it? Because the person is now passed away. And she had a signed will in 2011, but not a signed will. Her second will was unsigned. So, what happens in that respect? Thanks.
Thank
so
you
let me say that to you.
Yes,
an
Brian.
unsigned will is absolutely invalid. It has no meaning or bearing. The good intentions are meaningless. A will has to be signed, and it has to be witnessed by two. Your signature has to be witnessed by two independent people who have nothing to do with inheriting from the estate. It has to be dated correctly, and I see so many wills undated. And then you've also got to realize that sometimes if you've got assets overseas in different parts of the world, particularly property, you may need an international will, but you need to have a will signed. It needs to be recorded. And the fourth important component of a will is you have to firstly decide who the assets are going to. Secondly, you have to decide on who is going to be the executor. Thirdly, if you've got young children, you can't leave money to children under the age of 18, and I don't think you want to leave money to children even if they are 18. That's the time they should be furthering their careers and studying. And then lastly, you also need to make sure that in the event of, because we pay taxes all the time. You earn money and you pay tax. You then invest the money and you pay tax on interest and you pay capital gains tax. You then retire, you pay tax, and when you die, in larger estates, there is death duties. However, between a husband and a wife, there is no death duty. It's deferred. So if you leave to children, there could be death duties, and you need to have liquidity. And that will doesn't have to be complicated. However, if there are young children, then it gets a little bit more complicated because then you would leave assets to children in a trust. And then the trust is called a testamentary trust. It's a trust that's created on your death, not an inter vivos trust where you can go to an attorney and draw up a trust now and put assets in. But very simply, you leave assets to children in trust. You have to determine the most important thing, who are the trustees going to be, and you need to make sure if you've got a will, and you've got younger children, are those trustees still around? Is the executor still around? So a will needs to be re-looked at least once a year just to make sure there's no necessary changes. But an unsigned will is meaningless.
Thank you, Brian. Let's listen to another comment.
Hi, Brian. Errol here from Durban. You know, with the trouble in the Middle East now, it's caused the petrol price to go up, and the cost of living obviously goes up. So with this in mind, interest rates will probably be hiked, increased. This will be good news for pensioners, but bad news for those who are paying off bonds for their houses and paying off motor cars and etc. And with the high cost of healthcare today, most people can't afford medical aids. So I wish the NHI would kick in sooner than later. Maybe that's just wishful thinking. Errol, Durban.
Thank you, Errol.
Errol, thank you for that. Let me make this first comment. When you say, yes, interest rates are always good for pensioners, and pensioners have suffered very much in the last 18 months because interest rates have come down. But so is inflation down. And if inflation goes up, then even though pensioners may be getting a little bit more in interest, they're going to be paying more for the goods that they need. I'm not 100% sure interest rates are going to go up. The indications are that at this point in time, yes, with the oil price at around above $110, the cost of living is going to be enormous, and there's lots of other things, fertilizer and all the things that come in that help foodstuffs come down. You may be right. But let me just comment on healthcare. Yep, I agree with you. Healthcare is becoming unaffordable. There was a debate yesterday in Parliament about NHI. Joanne spoke about it earlier on this morning. All I can say is one thing, is that the costs of NHI could be to the detriment of every single medical aid holder, because everyone gets a rebate. Husband and wife get a rebate, children get a rebate, over 65 you get a rebate. And if they're going to finance it by doing away with the rebates, it tantamount to another tax. And don't kid yourself about NHI. It sounds good. Just have a look at what NHI in the UK is all about. You can sometimes wait 2 years for an operation. My late mother-in-law waited 3 years in the UK. She lived in the UK, and she waited 3 years for a hysterectomy. So while in principle it sounds great, you've got to understand who are the doctors who are going to be administering it, which of the major doctors are going to be prepared to work for the fees that they work for now. Most doctors are charging a lot more. So I'm saying from a healthcare point of view, my advice is you need to start looking at your health, making sure you can afford to downgrade on your medical aid because your health's that much better. And that means exercise and diet.
Thank you, Brian. Good advice in general there. John in Durban is on the line to us. John, do you have a problem with SARS?
Yes, good morning, Joanne and Brian. And I've got a problem here. SARS, he has sent me the message and he phoned me every time now. He said he wanted me to submit the RIP5. But now the company does not give me the RIP5. What should I do? Because they said now I owe them 35,000. And also we got a provident fund. Now we don't get a statement. I don't know where the provident fund is, what the company's contribution is. What should I do?
Right.
Well, John, the company has to issue with an IRP5. And I know sometimes it's very difficult for employees to cause trouble and be troubleshoot, but they have to issue with an IRP5. If you owe 35,000, just a question, do you earn from other sources other than your work salary?
No, I don't.
Then I don't understand why IRP, your tax isn't being deducted correctly and why you should owe 35. I'm going to give you my number, and I've given my website. John, send me a note on 011 880 4888 or on my website www.bhca.co.za. We'll be in touch with you, and we will talk to our tax practitioners to see what's going on. But your company has to, and let me also tell you, if an employer is not, the pension fund contribution that they're deducting, if they are not paying it over, let me tell you, firstly, they're in breach of legislation, and secondly, the directors of that company, as well as brokers who manage the scheme, can be held responsible for not ensuring that those funds are being paid over. It's hard for a broker because, remember, he's now having a go with his clients, and, brokers don't want to lose a client. And furthermore, I don't think directors understand the implications, but they can be held liable for all sorts of things. And furthermore, think about it, if your pension fund has got life cover and disability and someone dies and the insurance and the pension fund has suspended the benefits, there could be other claims. It's iniquitous that you can deduct money from an employee on a monthly basis and not pay it over. But you'll contact us, John, and I'll see how we can help.
That's lovely.
Oh,
Brian?
okay, give me that number again.
Right. Yes, no, I will give you that number. I'm going to put you back to Genelwe and Melissa, and one of them will give you that number, John. But I'm going to ask you, please, Brian, to stay with us. We've got a couple more questions for you. If you don't mind staying with us, we'll quickly take our news headlines, and then we'll come back to you in a moment.
Thank you, Joanne. On the news headlines, disaster management in the Guardian route in the Western Cape has confirmed that one person has died after a tree fell on top of a vehicle in Knysna. The Gokha municipality in the Eastern Cape says emergency teams are working around the clock after heavy overnight rains triggered flooding in parts of the region. And foreign nationals who run shops along Point Road in Durban CBD have shut their businesses ahead of a planned anti-immigrant march. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
You are listening to The Full Circle,
a space where generations come together in conversation that seek to spark curiosity, inspire innovation, and feed the curious mind. For arts, culture, and robust conversations, join me every weekday between 1 and 3 p.m. on The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga as we explore the stories, lessons, and conversations that guide us back to self.
SAfm supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAfm, leading the conversation. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
Taking a few more questions for Brian before we let him go. Brian, let's listen to this voice note. We have another listener who wants some information about a will.
Morning, Brian. I just want to find out one thing, regarding the wills. Okay, my name is Tebo. When a parent has done a will signed somewhere and we as kids do not know or are not aware about it, how do we know if she has, once she has passed away, where to look for the will? Because I would understand if there was a neutral place where all the wills will go and everybody will go and check out, like Home Affairs or something. But we might never know if there is a will existing. How will it come to our attention? Because we will not even know where to go look for it. Say maybe she doesn't have a lot of things that she has possessed in life, but those that are supposed to be shareable are in the will.
Okay, so let me say this to you. A lot of banks and financial institutions will draw up a will. They won't charge for the will, but their future charge will be they will become executors, and then there's tariff of how much. I had a situation this week where someone died. The executor is a bank. Is one asset. It happens to be an investment of 24 million. The debt duty cost for the executor is going to be 3.5%. So the starting point is, and you can always negotiate it lower, but the starting point is to first talk to the bank. Did the bank by any chance draw up a will? The second point is you're going to have to go through all the documents, because if there is no will, you die what's called intestate, and then you're in the hands of the master's office. And I don't need to tell you, the master's office is shambolic at the moment, and they've then got to have a look to see and make decisions who is going to become the executor. And then it works in terms of law. Inheritance is without a will. Husband goes to wife, wife goes to husband. down, if there's no husband or one spouse is only alive, it goes down to children. Then if children are under the age of 18, their trust to be informed, and all other things. If there are no children, it goes up the line. It goes to parents. If there are no parents, it goes to cousins. And that's why if you want your assets to go anywhere, you need to make sure you have a will. It's not a complicated document. It's not a scary document. But coming back to you, so firstly, you're going to have to look through her papers. Secondly, if she had an accountant or a lawyer as that represents her in any field, you need to talk to them. And the third and the other part is talk to the bank. If not, unfortunately, you die. The person died in testate, and you'll have to go through the master's office for the master to then determine who is going to be the executor, and then the will follow the certain format as explained.
Thank you for that, Brian. Let's take a call from Busa in Sky City. Good morning, Busa. What's on your mind?
How are you? How are you, Mrs. Joseph and Brian there?
No, we're well, thanks. Yes, go for it.
I want to ask Brian, man, I don't have will, ne? So I want to ask if whether it's necessary, because I married in the community of property with my wife, and because I've got 2 kids. To me, to say it's like if I die, everything's go to my wife. So I want to ask Brian if whether it is necessary to have a will.
Yes, Brian.
Well, just to make the point, married in community of property just means that all your assets are divided equally between you and your wife. So you still end up having 50% of the assets in your name. And yes, as I said, husband to wife, wife to husband. But have you got children?
Yes.
How old are your
children?
Yes. How old are they?
Two. The one is 21, the last one is 16.
Okay, so then you've got children who may be entitled to inherit from your estate, because then you leave it up to uncertainty and not for sure. It could all go to your wife, but it may not happen that way. And therefore, it's simple to go to one of these stationary, get a will and draw it up. But in your particular case, you need to determine if you and your wife die simultaneously, then what happens to the 21-year-old is a major, they'll receive money. Your 16-year-old is a minor, so that money's got to go into a trust. Who's going to be the trustees? Who's going to determine that? So you create unbelievable complications on death if you don't have a will. And it's so easy. There's Wills Week where attorneys are prepared to drop wills, but it's so easy, rather pay that 1,000 or 750 rand and just get someone to draw up a will, so you make sure that the assets you have go to the right place. And being married in community property doesn't in any way exonerate not having a will. It just means half the assets are yours and half the assets are your wife's in the event of your death.
Thank you for that.
Okay, no, thank you very much.
Thank you, Busa. I'm going to take a last voice note, Brian.
Indeed correct, but it's
Morning,
supposed
Brian.
to be reflected.
Can you please help me? I am a beneficiary in a trust to stay in the house of someone, my brother who's deceased, but his wife refuses us to go live there who are nominated. Can you please tell me what we can do about it?
Thank you. What did they do, Brian?
Just say that again. You, in terms of the will, you have usufruct of the property.
Well, I'm going to play her voice note again, so you can.
Just play it again.
Yeah.
Good morning, Brian. Can you please help me? I am a beneficiary in a trust to stay in the house of someone, my brother who's deceased, but his wife refuses us to go live there who are nominated. Can you please tell me what we can do about it?
Look, in other words, the property is owned by the trust and you have the right as a beneficiary to remain in the house. I don't know if the trust documents have any other conditions attached to that property. Who is responsible for the costs? But the only thing you can do is you'll have to see an attorney, and an attorney will have to help you get your rights. It's restored. Today, so often the word usufruct means the use of the fruits. So you have a property, which in the Latin word is bare dominion. That means someone owns the property, but the use of the fruits, like a fruit tree, someone owns the tree, but you have the rights to the fruit. So you have the right to be in that home. I don't know whether the trust would determine what the costs are and who's going to maintain those costs. That also needs to be dealt with. But your only recourse is to go to and see an attorney.
Thank you, Brian. Always good speaking to you, and we value your advice here on the Daily Discourse. Financial advisor Brian Hirsch of Colley and Associates. And let me just give you Brian's details again in case you'd like to get a hold of him. His website address is bhca.co.za, bhca.co.za, and the number on which you can reach him is 011 880 4888, 011 880 4888.
The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
20 minutes to 12, and of course it's that time of the day when we catch up with what is going on at the Madlanga Commission, which is underway in Pretoria right now. There was a sharp and detailed account from Major General Hendrik Flynn at the Madlanga Commission, and he laid bare multiple failures in the handling of a major Durban drug seizure. He confirmed that the wrong unit, the Forensic Science Laboratory, was initially contacted instead of the local Criminal Record Centre, and that strict evidence protocols under National Instruction 8 of 2017 were simply not followed. So listen to this. Nearly 999 kilograms of cocaine were moved from Isipingo to Port Shepstone in KZN without the required SAP 13 transfer documentation. The cocaine was held for 2 days at an unauthorized Hawks facility before being officially recorded. Now, further irregularities included the inaccurate SAP 13 entries, where most exhibits were labelled as cocaine without any actual testing. Flynn also highlighted serious security lapses at the Port Shepstone DPCI offices, which had suffered multiple break-ins prior to the seizure, and of course no upgrades were implemented to make things worse. So these failures form the backdrop to the 2021 case, in which 541 kilograms of cocaine valued at around 200 million rand were later stolen from Hawks premises, and this fueled ongoing concerns of internal involvement. Right now, that is continuing at the Madlanga Commission in Pretoria. The Hawks head of serious organised crime investigations, Hendrik Flynn, continuing his testimony at this hour. All right, we are listening to more of your voice notes before we say goodbye to you, because, of course, you know we do the book reading in the last few hours of our show. But I'd like to first listen to some of your comments on the issues that we covered earlier during the course of the Daily Discourse. One of them was the issue of voter registration, voter preparation, and the ramping up of education in the run-up to the 4th of November local government elections. Let's listen to your comments on this.
Hi, good morning, Joanne. Bafana Sbia here from Nkwenkwe, Mtonjaneni. You see this thing of demarcation in these rural areas. I don't know where does IEC get those names. They refer us to somewhere far, maybe 20 kilometers from where we stay. They say Nomponjwana, and whereas we are at Nkwenkwe, at St. Paul's, there is a St. Paul's school, St. Paul's primary school. Where do they get this demarcation? Because they don't know where we stay. They don't consult, they just demarcate. I'm so worried. I'm registered though. Thanks.
I really hope you can get there, and I wish that we had been able to take that voice note a little bit earlier on when we had Dr. Mgunu from the IEC on the program. My understanding is that, you know, they review demarcations before every election, and then they declare the election once the demarcations have been sorted out. Why you would have ended up having to go to an area to vote that is far away from you, really far away from you, is beyond me. But I would recommend to you that you do try to get hold of the IEC and flag this with them, please. I'm just actually going through the numbers that we have for them, and I think if you have any of these questions, make use of these phone numbers: 0800 11 8000, 0800 11 8000. You can get hold of the IEC there. You can put to them any questions that you would like if you are worried about issues like this, and hopefully they can assist you with answers to some of these questions. There's also quite a lot being said about Fadil Adams' arrest and whether you felt that it was fair or not.
Good morning, Joanne. I think I would like to agree with your caller. You know, the manner in which Mr. Adams was arrested, I mean, we've seen the most corrupt politicians. They've never been treated that way, Joanne. They've never been treated that way. The question is, why this one? All I'm asking for is consistency. I'm not going to dive deep into the merits of the case. No, I'm not interested in that. Just the manner in which he was arrested. I think that one for me, I mean, it raised so much questions. Thank you so much. This is Luzugu in the Eastern Cape.
Hi, Joanne. This is Sabata from Durban. I would like to quickly respond to that listener that is complaining about how Fadil was treated, was put in the back of a van. Fadil was invited to come to present himself to the police station, which he never did. Apparently, he was gonna do it today. That's what I'm hearing. He was gonna do it on Friday, but they waited and waited for him until they decided that, okay, he's not presenting himself. We've given him enough of a chance. Then they went to collect him like any other person. I mean, I do not see any ill treatment there.
Good morning, ma'am, and good morning, SAfm listeners. Mzo Cape Town. I just want to comment about this thing of the arrest of Frederick Adams. You know, Adams, he knows that he did something wrong. So yeah, for what he did, it was wrong. So he must face music. Yeah, he must face music. Mzotolo Lona, Cape Town, the Uber driver, man. Thank you.
Mzotolo, thank you very much for that message. Some of you are also talking about the issue of certain Nigerian leaders wanting to break ties with South Africa over issues with migrants in our country.
Good morning, my sister Joanne. My sister, I'm so disappointed, man, with these leaders from other countries, more especially Nigerian leaders. They are calling us South Africans that we are killing and we are chasing away their people. It's not like that. How many times we've been complaining about the drugs which are selling by the Nigerians? How many times? They never came to our rescue. So if we take action now, we are tired. People of South Africa have got frustration about this. They are so frustrated about this. They are coming from other countries and do a lot of illegal things in this country.
And one of you says, good morning, Joanne and the listeners. The issue about the Nigerian government wanting to cut ties with South Africa, for me, it's just a push from the US government to take advantage of the situation, says Dumelo Molefe from Lamontville in Durban. All right, the other issue that came up was that coalition, a possible coalition between among the EFF, the MK and the ANC. Some of you were in favor of it and some of you not.
Good day, Joanne. I agree with the brother. The EFF, MK, the extension of ANC. They are from the same womb, ANC. They can't be trusted. No. Thank you. From Penny Kibla Park.
Thank you very much for that. Someone else also called in and said maybe we need a return to the original ideas around democracy and inclusion, because one of our callers made the point earlier that they feel that not everybody has been fully co-opted and included in our democracy, and you responded to that as well.
Good morning, Joanne. It's a volume of Richards Bay Metraka. You know, as South Africans, sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. The reason we're not going forward, going backwards, the looting and so on, because we are not being honest to ourselves. The progressive forces, what are they progressing on? The country is going backwards. We're talking about progressive forces. We're still talking of ANC. No, man, let us wake up and smell the coffee. That's why the other African nations, they want to take over us, because we are sleeping. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your input. And of course, that's the last voice note that I will take for now. But as always, we're continuing these conversations all the time on the Daily Discourse. And this is why we love hearing from you, pooling your opinions and hearing your varying ways of seeing the world and perceiving what we need to do to keep our country moving forward on the most positive trajectory for everyone who lives here. That is a really important conversation to have. We'll do it all again tomorrow. It's that time of day when we bring you our book reading. The book is Unfair Way by Jerry Glepu. You may have heard our interview with Ndate Jerry a few days ago. On that note, we wrap up the Daily Discourse for today. We'll catch you tomorrow morning at 9. After the news, the brilliant Sakina Kamwendo brings you update at noon. So take care. From me, Joanne Joseph, and the Daily Discourse team, bye for now.
SAfm presents another episode of the book, The Unfair Way, The Untold History of South African Black Golf, written by Jerry Lepu, read by Simpiwe Kwana. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised.
The apartheid regime was very effective in achieving its objectives and maintaining the subjugation of black people and other people of color. The laws dictated where one could live, work, and socialize. Freedom of movement and freedom of association could not even be conceptualized in the early years of the regime. So fierce was the fear it invoked, and more so, the fear of its enforcers. Sport has been considered by many well-known political figures all over the world as a mechanism for social cohesion and nation building. Alas, the apartheid regime ensured its might was felt even in this arena. Black and white teams were forbidden from competing against each other. Black people could not play for white teams, and white people could not play for black teams. Sporting officials made certain that the apartheid laws were adhered to. Blacks were only allowed to play among themselves and only at their places of residence. Every aspect of sports thoroughly reflected the overarching objectives of the apartheid regime to keep different races segregated in every aspect of life. It is against this background that the forthcoming stories are told, against the confines set by the brutality of apartheid policymakers. It is about a group of black golfers across many years and different age groups who forged ahead in daring to dream of playing the elite sport and etching a place for themselves in history. At a time when black people interested in taking part in sport had adapted to playing at separate facilities, often neglected and poorly maintained, black golfers demanded to be recognized and given a platform to display their talent. Golf was not a popular sport among black people, but those who played were very confident in their abilities and were willing to do whatever they deemed necessary to access better facilities. When black people were eventually allowed access to better facilities, their performance was often poor, a testament to the reality of only being able to hone their skills in subpar conditions. We begin now with the original black golfers, the caddies. Those who once toiled in the shadows of white players at exclusive golf clubs and courses, understanding the game but not able to fully enjoy it. The caddies of the old days set the tone for the black golfers who would later emerge and conquer the regime to pursue their passion. Chapter 2. From a caddy to a golfer. The origins and development of black golf in South Africa. Most of South Africa's black golfers, particularly the founding fathers, cut their teeth in the game as caddies. Initially, blacks became caddies as a form of employment, a job to earn money, and not necessarily out of interest in the game as a sport. The interest in golf as a sport would develop in later years. As such, there are no records about the exact date as to when blacks started playing golf in South Africa. What is known for sure, though, is that after having been a caddy for several years, it would only be natural for a caddy to soon develop enough interest to play the sport and become a golfer. However, was it that easy? The caddy. Mr. Andrew Mlangeni a former ANC Umkhonto weSizwe, MK member, who was sentenced to life imprisonment following the Rivonia treason trial, was a keen golfer. He traced his association with the game back to the days when he was a caddie in the then Orange Free State in 1937. On his release from prison, he continued with the game of golf from where he had left off before being imprisoned for life, along with Nelson Mandela and other treason trialists from Robben Island. It is said that caddies make the best golfers. There are, however, a few golfers who did not start playing the game as caddies. What is not in dispute is that the first black golfers were originally caddies. The major function of a caddy was to carry a bag full of golf clubs and balls. Here and there to find a golfer's ball which, after a poor shot, had landed off the fairway into thick grass or in water. However, some caddies became involved in the game over time, but not as players. Their involvement evolved through giving advice to the golfer for whom they were caddying. To be able to do this, a caddy would have to be experienced. These types of caddies would advise the player about what club to use for his next shot on the fairway. But not all of them had an interest in the game beyond carrying the golf bag. Good and experienced caddies were much sought after by the players. They offered invaluable assistance to them. Some golfers, in fact, had their own personal caddies whom they relied heavily on, particularly during tournaments. The green, the most perfectly manicured part of the golf course with finely cut grass, where the final shot into a hole is played. It is the most important part of the game of golf. Sometimes a major tournament is either won or lost on the green. This is where experienced caddies prove their worth to the golfer. The caddy would advise his boss about how and in what direction to stroke or hit the ball. Showing interest in the game. From their close association with golfers, some of the caddies would start showing an interest in the game while caddying. Caddies would be seen aping their masters by swinging with a branch of a tree. When their bosses were out of sight, they would even swing with a golf club. When they got back home, they would create golf clubs from wood, planks, tree branches, water pipes, and galvanized iron. They would then use rags, planks, cotton reels, and wood to create a golf ball. Some of them would be even more creative by using golf balls that they had retrieved from a rough or water hazards at the golf courses while caddying. As they envisioned themselves as golfers, they would swing in the style they had copied from their masters. The caddies would also obtain old golf clubs. Some of these young aspirant golfers would use 2 or 3 clubs when playing amongst themselves in the bushes. When asked for, a club was thrown to a player who needed it rather than it properly placed in his hands. They would use these clubs to drive from the tee in the middle of the fairway as well as to part on the sand green of the felt golf course. Very soon, some of these caddies would move to the next level and become golfers playing in the township golf courses. They would have acquired a set of clubs which were of different makes, ranging from Gradage, Slazenger, Dunlop, Bobby Jones Spalding, Penfold, Wilson, McGregor, etc. In the former Transvaal, one such golfer who would soon make a mark after his journey as a caddy turned golfer is Joanne Semenya. Joanne started his involvement with golf as a caddy. He was later appointed as a shop assistant at Waterkloof Country Club. After being invited as a player in the 1960 Transvaal Non-European Championship, he finished 5th. There were many other Semenyas all over the country whose exploits will be discussed in the chapters to follow. Many of those who took to golf as caddies had, upon finding employment, became new golfers who bought themselves golf clubs and played regularly on the fell courses. Others used a variety of clubs which they had bought from pawn shops or were passed on to them.
There was another episode of The Unfair Way, The Untold History of South African Black Golf, written by Jerry Lepu, read by Simpiwe Kwana. The book is available at the Bridge Bookstore. It is broadcast on SAfm at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on the Daily Discourse. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patal, read by Simpiwe Kwana, production by Wiseman Manele, Nanda Koza, and Tato Mapuruma.
It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 6th of May, 2026. A very warm welcome to Update here on SAfm and during the conversation. I'm Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour.
Expecting food for our children. Our children are dying every day. Today and every day, their children are dying because of their food. So they must go. We don't need you anymore.
The community of Tembisa and Gauteng's East Rand is protesting, demanding the permanent closure of all spaza shops in the area owned by foreign nationals. And
as a detective at organised crime, the warrant unfortunately cannot determine whether it's cocaine or not. So that's a misrepresentation.
The Hawks head of serious organised crime investigations, Major General Hendrik Flynn, is back on the witness stand at the Madlanga Commission on day 102. Please share your views with us. 41391 is the SMS line number. You'll be charged 150 per SMS. You can also get in touch via X at SABC News_radio, or you can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 082-692-3909. Well, these and more stories coming up on this Wednesday edition of Update at Noon. First, though, here's the latest news with Ondelambana. Thank you, Sakina. On the top stories, one person dies after a tree fell on top of a vehicle, and foreign national shops closed in Durban CBD ahead of planned march. For SAfm News, I am Ondelambana, and a very good day. Disaster management in the Guardian route in the Western Cape has confirmed that one person has died after a tree fell on top of a vehicle in Knysna. Emergency workers are still at the scene and are trying to remove the tree and wreckage. Disaster management head Gerard Otto had warned people not to park under big trees as the high-speed winds can be dangerous.
The Pisang Valley River in Plet burst its walls. Some areas along this river is currently being evacuated, and people will be housed in community halls in that area. We would like to advise the public rather avoid big trees and not park under big trees. Unfortunately, this morning we had a fatality of somebody parked under a big tree and the tree collapsed.
The Gqoga municipality in the Eastern Cape says emergency teams are working around the clock after heavy overnight rains triggered flooding in parts of the region. About 100 millimeters of rain fell, with human stop among the hardest hit areas, forcing evacuations and leaving several residents in need of shelter and aid. Mayor Hetting Bonman says emergency teams are on the ground.
Our teams have been clearing blocked storm water and so forth over the last few days. We know the areas that usually flood, and our teams are on standby and making sure that we have people ready to act as and when areas are flooded. So we're doing everything that we can. We're really thankful for the rain, obviously, because our dam levels are extremely low. So while being thankful for the rain, we have to make sure that we protect our infrastructure, we protect the lives of our residents, and therefore we're really working hard to make sure that we are ready for the rain that is beautifully falling.
Residents in Tembisa on Gauteng's East Rand have taken to the streets, gathering in large numbers at Swazi Inn, voicing anger over the sale of unsafe and non-compliant goods at local spaza shops. The protest follows growing calls for the closure of non-compliant, mainly foreign-owned shops amid concerns over expired and unsafe food products allegedly being sold to the community. Residents say they are taking a stand to protect their health and safety, accusing some shop owners of putting lives at risk. Foreign nationals who run shops along Point Road in Durban CBD have shut their businesses ahead of a planned anti-immigrant march. Various lobby groups are set to march from King Dinuzulu Park to the Point area near South Beach. The area has become a hotspot for social tensions as well as drug-related and other criminal activities. In response, provincial police have carried out several operations targeting the sale of illicit goods and drugs. Two Nigerian nationals, Benjamin Ogo and Henry Eze, who say they are legally in the country, expressed disappointment over the march. They maintain that as fellow Africans, they feel unfairly targeted and have been forced to close their shops due to safety concerns.
I'm sad because we heard yesterday there will be a march today. That is why you can see all the shops are closed, disrupting businesses. It's not good. Understand? They must allow the law to take its course. So that is what I have to say.
I'm so disappointed that this kind of thing is happening right now. For the past this is like almost going to a month. This crisis has always been on xenophobia, and I don't know how to call it. Whether should I call it Afrophobia? So we are Africans, and I'm so surprised that we are going through this. We're all one blood here. This is Africa.
Members of the National Coloured Congress have gathered for a prayer in their constituency office in West Region Mitchell's Plain on the Cape Flats. The prayer is for their leader and MP Fidel Adams, who was arrested in Cape Town yesterday by the Political Killings Task Team and taken to KwaZulu-Natal. He is expected to be processed at the Durban Westville Police Station later today. He's facing allegations of fraud and obstructing the course of justice in connection with the murder of ANC Youth League leader Cindy Sobakanga. The NCC is joined by members of the Patriotic Alliance. Recapping the top story, disaster management in the Guardian route in the Western Cape has confirmed that one person has died after a tree fell on top of a vehicle in Knysna. I'm Madlanga for SAfm News. Headlines at 12:30.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Thanks, Ondela. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 6 minutes after 12 here on Update at Noon. Thanks so much for joining us on this Hump Day edition of the show. Now, it's the second day of testimony for the Hawks head of serious organised crime investigations, Major General Hendrik Flynn at the Madlanga Commission. And again, some very, very interesting testimony being heard by the Commission, and also just how procedure was flouted. And with regard to that drug bust and the cocaine that was allegedly seized. At this point, the way things were done, there isn't even clarity. Nobody can definitively say whether it was in fact cocaine, whether it was in fact cocaine that was transported to Port Shepstone from Isipingo. There are just so many loopholes that the Commission is currently going through. But of course, we'll take you there later on in the show. And then, of course, inclement weather in various parts of the country. And unfortunately, there have been some fatalities here in Gauteng, in Primrose, outside Germiston. There was a massive tree that fell on about 5 shacks this morning. And unfortunately, a 20-year-old woman lost her life in that incident. Occurred at around 2:30 a.m. this morning. And we've also had reports of another fatal incident, again, a tree falling over, this time killing the person in a vehicle in Knysna. So we'll check in with the various disaster management teams around the country. There have been various level 6, 8 and 4 and 2 warnings issued across the country. But of course, that level 8 warning pertaining to parts of the Garden route and the Western Cape. So we'll check in with some of those teams as well. And then there's another march today, this time in Tembisa. And we see here in fact, our reporters are there. The community is demanding the closure of all foreign-owned spaza shops in the area, and they are going around from shop to shop and basically ensuring that none of those shops owned by foreign nationals are open today. And we're also keeping an eye on what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal, and this is of course where the leader of the National Coloured Congress and Member of Parliament Fadil Adams is expected, and he was arrested in Cape Town yesterday, transferred to Durban. So we have our reporters out at the Westville Correctional Facility, which is where he is expected to arrive at and then, of course, appear in court tomorrow. That is, as far as we know, what is expected to unfold. So those just some of the stories. There are, of course, others. The Constitutional Court continuing to hear that legal challenge against the National Health Insurance Act and, of course, a few other court stories as well.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
Now, the community of Tembisa in Gauteng is protesting and demanding the permanent closure of all spaza shops in the area owned by foreign nationals. The residents say that the foreign-owned spaza shops are selling spoiled food and they believe that the shops should be shut down for good. But for more on this, we joined on the line now by our reporter, Luyanda Danka. Luyanda, good afternoon. First of all, just give us a sense of what has happened since this morning and if, the protesters are saying anything more than what I've just stated at this point.
Good afternoon to you, Sakina. We are live here in Tembisa. Residents here are protesting. They are demanding the permanent closure of spaza shop, Sakina. And this has been happening since the morning. They are really angry, Sakina. They are demanding the spaza shop to be closed here. Not only the spaza shop, but also the vendors, people, especially the foreign-owned vendor spaces, they must be closed. So they are demanding the permanent closure, Sakina.
So, Leander, they, of course, are protesting today and going around the township from shop to shop, space to space. But what are they expecting or hoping will happen beyond today?
Sakina, they are expecting the government to act immediately. I'm also going to shortly introduce my guest here who will be joining us live just to get a better understanding, Sakina, of today's march. Mr. Shabangu, thank you so much for your time. If you can just tell us what are you expecting from the government today?
No, asifuni ukuthi labantu babela kithi la ngoba manje ba-occupy indawo ekumele ngabe nathi siyayi-occupy sikhona ukuyi-occupy le ndawo ngoba bona bagcwele kule ndawo lezo. And okwesibili i-government iyahluleka ukusisiza ngalabantu bayo kanti yibo eyabaletha la. Manje sisesifuna ukuthi bahambe namhlanje asibashayi kodwa namhlanje siyabanika inothisi ukuthi abahambe babuyele emazweni akubo nangakubo zikhona inwele bayogunda abantu bangakubo nathi sizogunda abantu bethu la baye ngakubo emakhaya nale kube emakhaya bangakuthengisa ukudla nathi sizoyithengisela ukudla la. And okwesithathu amakula lawo athengisa nezinto ezibolile namanje ezinye besihamba siyishutha la endleleni sithola ukuthi izinto esibayile ezibolile bathengisela abantwana bethu bayafa singazi ukuthi yini kanti yibo ababulala ngama-snacks.
Okay, Baba, if you can just shortly tell us, do you believe today's march is effective?
Izowenza ngoba ayigcine namhlanje nakusasa bengakahambi asabafuni ngisho ey'tandini zethu sesibaxoshe nala sibebaqhashiselwe siyabakhipha nabo sizobakhipha kuze ukuthi baphele.
Thank you so much. Sakina, that was Ubaba Usfiso Shabangu telling the SABC that they are sick and tired of foreign-owned spaza shops because one of the things that makes the community to be actually angry here, Sakina, is that these people are selling, it is alleged that these people are selling expired food. We also spoke with one of the residents by the name of Mama Joyce, who told it means Mama Joyce, who told us these people are selling also drugs. It's not just about food, but it's also about drugs. So they are demanding the government to act immediately, and also these shops to be immediately closed until maybe they get a proper documentation. They get maybe some sort of the food must be inspected. The Sakina, the food that they are selling. So for now, Sakina, I think it's back to you in studio. We will definitely make sure that we keep you updated and maybe talk with some of the organizers.
Well, thank you so much, Luyanda Tanka, who's our reporter out on the scene in Tembisa. And our apologies there for that racial slur that was used by the person being interviewed by Luyanda Tanka. And those, of course, are not the views of the SABC. And this is where we leave that. It's 14 minutes after 12.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
Meanwhile, various lobby groups are set to march from King Dinizulu Park to Point area near South Beach in Durban. And the area has become a hotspot for social tensions as well as drug-related and other criminal activities. We have our reporter Kalumusa Zulu in Durban for us. Kalumusa, good afternoon. So has the march started, and what is the situation currently in terms of that protest?
Greetings to you, Sakina, and the listeners at home. Well, what I can tell you is that the West Street within the Durban CBD has been brought to a standstill as hundreds of protesters make their way towards the South Beach area where we believe the march will be coming to an end. What also we can tell you is that within the West Street, most businesses, of which most of them are owned by foreign nationals, have been closed for the day.
This is, of course, not the first time that this has happened over the last month or so, Kalmusa. So just in terms of the action that is sought, because the residents are marching, but has government responded in any way?
Sakina, there has been no official response that we know of. However, from the organizers of the march, a question was posed to them in terms of they have been doing this for some time. What makes them think that they will win? But they say that they will continue marching until government hears them and until each and every citizen in the country joins them, forcing the government to listen to what they have to say.
So that march, of course, taking place in the Central Business District in Durban. Are there any traffic officials or other law enforcement agencies in attendance, Kalumusa?
Definitely, Sakina. Police or law enforcement officials have come out in their numbers. However, we did spoke to Metro Police yesterday in terms of their preparation, particularly to this march. Now, the biggest challenge, Sakina, is that the organizers had not applied for a permit. So even police are not aware in terms of which roads particularly will be affected. However, we did hear that Metro will be monitoring from their CCTV cameras, but they just following the protesters as they do not know the exact route. But to answer your question, yes, definitely, there is high police visibility in this particular march.
And the foreign nationals who are said to own many of those businesses along that road, have they been seen at all? And, as we said, this has been going on for a while now. What are they saying about these developments?
Sakina, our other colleagues will be covering that part in terms of getting a response and speaking to foreign nationals towards the end of the march. So we are yet to hear in terms of what they have to say about this particular march and also these series of marches that have been happening, particularly here in Durban.
Kalumusa, thanks so much for that update. And that is, of course, our reporter Kalumusa Zulu, who's in Durban. And this is where lobby groups are staging yet another march in the Durban CBD. Today, marching from King Dinizulu Park to a Point area near South Beach. So let us know your thoughts on these developments.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAfm.
Police in Knysna have opened an inquest docket after the body of a 37-year-old woman was recovered from a vehicle on Main Street in Knysna earlier today. Now, authorities say that emergency services were first dispatched around 10 to 8 this morning after the vehicle was found under a tree, which was directly in front of the police station with the driver trapped inside. Warrant Officer Christopher Spies of the Knysna Police in the Western Cape explains.
Knysna Police opened an inquest docket after the body of the 37-year-old woman was retrieved from a vehicle in Knysna this morning. Reports available indicates that emergency personnel were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, they found the vehicle with the driver trapped inside. The victim's body was later retrieved. A portion of the road remains closed while mop-up operations are still underway.
And that was Warrant Officer Christopher Spies of the Knysna Police in the Western Cape. Meanwhile, schools in some parts of the province also remain closed due to adverse weather conditions. Disaster management in the Garden Route District municipality say that all role players are on high alert following an orange level 8 warning for the area. For more on this, we're joined by SABC News reporter Sagri Chetty to tell us more about this situation. Sagri, good afternoon. So let's start with the school closures and which districts exactly, cities, towns, municipalities, where are the children not attending school and for how long?
Sakina, good afternoon to you and the listeners. Well, there's 3 areas affected by the school closures, and that's in 2 different districts. That's the Garden Route district and the Little Karoo district. So those areas, there's also another area which is Knysna, George and Oudtshoorn. Those forms the 3 different areas where there's a total of, I think, 125 schools that have been closed. So there's probably thousands of learners from these 2 districts. It's closed for today and tomorrow, with learners set to return to school on Friday, I'm told.
Well, Sagri, just in terms of incidents that have been reported, we just listened to the police about that incident in Knysna. Have there been any other incidents of either fatalities or injuries reported?
Well, yes, unfortunately, as you know, there's been one fatality in Knysna. Damage, I'm told so far, there's quite a few trees that have fallen. Another one, just as you enter Knysna from the Eastern Cape side of the N2, there's a tree blocking the N2. So some traffic delays there, I'm told, and motorists advised to use an alternative route, which is the Langkloof, to get to the Cape Town side of the N2. And in Plettenberg Bay, the Pisang Valley River burst its banks. So there's flooding there, and disaster management says some residents close to the river have been moved to a place of safety. There's also been some mudslides in Mossel Bay, as well as sand that was washed onto the N2, and that's being cleaned up right now. Road closures at this stage include the Swartberg Pass and the Maringspoort Pass. That's a pass that links Oudtshoorn to Beaufort West and eventually the N1. So a river next to the pass came up with all that rain in that area. There's also been reports of power outages in several areas that Eskom says they're actually working on right now.
Well, Sagri, thank you so much for that update. That's our SABC News reporter, Sagri Chetty, speaking to us there from the Western Cape. Meanwhile, residents of the Eastern and Western Cape remain on high alert this week, following, of course, that warning by the South African Weather Services. So 2 level 8 warnings for disruptive rainfall affecting parts of both provinces. Now, lower level warnings have also been issued for several other provinces as authorities warn of possible flooding, road damage, and of course, increased risks to vulnerable communities. Joined in studio right now by Joel Guys, SABC weather forecaster, for the latest forecast. Joel, unfortunately, we have seen now at least 2 lives lost after the onset of this inclement weather. But where are we right now with regard to the warnings for the various provinces?
Yeah, that's quite a very sad eventuality, people losing their lives in this weather. That's why we always try to give out these warnings ahead of time and also implore people to heed the warnings, especially when they come across flooded rivers. You should never try to cross any flooded rivers. I heard you said other provinces have lower levels of warnings. I'm sure you could be referring to KwaZulu-Natal and to Mpumalanga. Let me quickly say that has just been lifted, so no more warnings for Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal, but we are still expecting a few showers for those provinces. Things are getting drier for the northern and eastern areas, but for the Western Cape and parts of the Eastern Cape, that's where we will continue to see this inclement weather.
So that's where we're seeing the orange level 8 warning. So what sort of atmospheric conditions drive these level 8 warnings?
I'm sure a lot of people are now quite familiar with the cutoff law, which happens, they come through mostly during the transitional seasons. So that is when we are moving from spring into summer, and also from during autumn, moving into winter. That's when we get them. And these are systems that typically become quite intense and produce heavy rains, cold temperatures. We can even feel the cold here in Gauteng, but the system is sitting over the Western Cape at the moment. So that's the particular weather system that is affecting us.
And then, of course, Joel, with regard to the rainfall, and where and which parts of the country are we expecting the heaviest rainfall at the moment?
So the heaviest rains are going to be on the Garden Route. So we are talking of all the areas, at least from George eastwards to Jeffreys Bay and Gqeberha, and also into the interior of the Western Cape, all the way up to possibly Beaufort West. We could still see those heavy rains in those areas. And for the Western Cape, we are talking of places like Willowmore and even Robert Sobukwe.
And, just looking at the current forecasting models, and, people often question these, you said this is going to happen and then it doesn't happen. So how confident are you in our current models and systems?
What I always tell people is that our 2-day forecast for 20 years ago is just as good as our 5-day forecast at this time. That's how good our models have become. Back in the day, the further you try to forecast, the less accurate you would be. But these days, you find that even a 5-day forecast would just be as accurate as a 1-day forecast. So we do have quite a lot of confidence in our models. And talking of those models, right now, I've just been checking before I came to have a chat with you. We're still expecting rainfall totals in excess of 100 millimeters in places along the Garden Route for the next 24 hours.
So again, just to put that into context, along the Garden Route, 100 millimeters or more. So what is the average rainfall there, just to try and gauge the severity of what they are experiencing?
I wouldn't have the figures offhand at the moment, but what I would say is that whenever we forecast heavy rain, that will be 50 millimeters, at least 50 millimeters over 24 hours is considered to be heavy rain. It results in flash flooding in most places. So you can imagine that if we are now doubling that in 24 hours, that's quite a lot of rain.
Quite severe. And just finally, Joel, in terms of the next 24 to 48 hours, what advice would you have for our listeners right now, and what immediate risks should be prioritized over the next 24 to 48 hours?
So the immediate risks would be your flooding. So if people are going to be on the roads, you might need to avoid any flooded rivers. And also to stay warm, because it's quite cold. So hypothermia could be a problem with some people. Then on the coastal areas, we're also experiencing strong winds, and those strong winds could damage infrastructure, and people need to be to secure whatever loose items around their properties.
Joel Guy, thanks so much. And of course, Joel Guy is weather forecaster here at SABC. And that is the outlook for the next 24 to 48 hours. And you heard Joel say how accurate these models are. So you can take that to the bank. And also, the disaster management officials have been warning, they've been urging people, don't travel in those areas unless you absolutely have to. If you don't have to be out, don't go out. Because as we saw, unfortunately now, it's not just about the flash flooding, the 2 deaths that have occurred that we've heard from disaster management here in Gauteng, that occurred in Primrose on the East Rand, and of course also in Knysna. Both of those were as a result of trees. Massive trees falling over, a tree falling on shacks in the first incident in Germiston, and a tree falling on a car in front of a police station there in Knysna. So please be careful. They've also said, especially in these areas where we are seeing heavy rains, don't park next to or under big trees. Please try and avoid that. And one would just hope that people would heed these messages from the South African Weather Service, as well as from your disaster management teams in your various districts. And don't forget, there are emergency numbers. I'll see if we can get them and maybe put them out on our social media platforms. But of course, if you can also just check in your area, there are emergency numbers that you can call if you find yourself in a spot of bother. But of course, next 24 to 48 hours, we're still on alert. And then, of course, from there, I think it starts looking sunny if I look at the longer forecast. So for the time being, please be safe, please take care. But we'll leave it there for the time being regarding the inclement weather conditions. It's 12:30. Here's Ondelambana with your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Sakina. On the news headlines, police in the Guardian route in the Western Cape have confirmed that a 37-year-old woman died after a tree fell on her vehicle in Knysna. Residents in Tembisa are up in arms, calling for the closure of foreign-owned spaza shops, accusing them of selling unsafe food products and putting the lives of community members at risk. And the World Health Organization says another case of hantavirus has been confirmed, bringing the total to 3 confirmed cases and 5 suspected. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Economic news on SAfm. Facts and figures you can count on.
Well, it's a Wednesday. Our analyst this afternoon is Ricardo Smith, Chief Investment Officer at ABSA Investments. Good afternoon, Ricardo.
Afternoon, Sakina. Seeing quite a positive day today for markets. The all share is up around 3.5%. This is predominantly led by the resource sector, which is up 5.5%. But it is really across the board, as we see financials also up 3%, with industrials up 2.7%. In terms of individual counters, we are seeing it's a lot of the gold and platinum miners, which have been under a bit of pressure as we've seen some pullbacks in gold. So Harmony leading the charge with Impala Platinum, Sibanye, Stillwater, and the likes. We have seen gold adding $150 per ounce today. Brent crude pulling back $9 USD per barrel, with West Texas Intermediate also pulling back about $9 USD per barrel, with Brent crude oscillating around $100 USD per barrel today. We are seeing the rand slightly stronger against the dollar, and of course, gold is dollar denominated, so that has boded well for gold. So a bit of risk on sentiments today, and a bit of positivity in markets from an oil price and market perspective. Globally, seeing Infotech up about 2.5%, financials up, consumer discretionary, with the only counters on the back foot being energy, and of course they've been on a rally. And locally, we are seeing Sasol down around 6.8%. A bit of profit taking and a bit of risk on sentiments from a market perspective. S&P closed positive yesterday. UK markets up 2%, Euro Stocks 50 up 2.6%, seeing some positivity as well from the Asian markets. From an economic perspective, we did see the FOMC in the US holding rates steady last week. We also saw the Bank of England and ECB in line with expectation, really holding those rates as they are worried about inflation. There was a bit of positivity with still, some talks of some potential rate cuts as this inflation is being seen as transitory. But with the current oil price at current levels, not expecting those rate cuts, but as soon as that comes down, we would start anticipating that. This coming week, expecting US unemployment to come in steady, non-farm payrolls, and looking to see the latest PMI numbers across the US, the UK, and the Eurozone, and as well as locally. Thanks, Sakina.
Well, thank you, Ricardo Smith. Ricardo is Chief Investment Officer at Absa Investments.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAfm.
Yeah, Sakina, that's really here in Kuma. Sakina, I agree fully with the marchers who say the foreign-owned shop owners, must go, because these spouses actually belong to us, Sakina. It can't be correct, huh? We are jobless, and all of a sudden, and during democracy, then they came and took up our sponsor shops. No, man. South Africans first. Thanks, William Kuma.
Good day. Bishop Makwana from Leboa Home, Zone F. Sakina, the president of the country, Ramaphosa, left the country unannounced on an unofficial visit using the resources of the state, go and die with wanted criminals in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa must resign. And my understanding is that if he resigns, he must just hand it over to Aaron Motsoaledi. He's the only one who's not tainted with corruption, money laundering, and theft.
Good day, Sakina, your producers, and to the listeners. Sakina, let me just put this point straight. As long as we have foreign nationals from Africa in this country, more specifically Nigerians, the crime will still remain high, because those that are actually claiming to be documented, they have fraudulently received the papers to stay in this country in a bad way or in a wrong way. Again, even if it was the right way for that matter, the guys are criminals. You cannot give a person that is known to be a criminal a citizenship to your country. It's fixing back in Cape Town. Thank you.
How are you? Well, this is JCK Kaunda from Sin. It says, Sakina, it's like the government, especially President Ramaphosa, is taking this thing really much lightly. That is a ticking time bomb. At any time, it's going to explode. He must never undermine those marches. Even French Revolution, people started with marches, and then they toppled the government. I'm speaking about French Revolution. The president must be just awake. It's a red tape. Let me rest my case for now. JCK Kaunda from Sina.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
Well, thank you so much for those voice notes. Let's quickly check in now with our reporter in KZN, Zanele Buthelezi, where the leader of the National Coloured Congress, Fadil Adams, is expected to arrive at the Durban Westville police station. Now, Adams was arrested yesterday by the Political Killings Task Team in Cape Town and is facing allegations of fraud and obstructing the ends of justice. And this in connection with the alleged interference in an investigation into the murder of former ANC Youth League leader Sindiso Makaka. And we're joined now by our reporter Zanele Buthelezi. Zanele, good afternoon. So what is the latest in terms of what we've been able to confirm regarding Mr. Fadil Adams and his whereabouts, and also where he's expected to arrive and then be incarcerated?
Yes, Sakina, what we know at the stage is that he was transported from Cape Town overnight in a police vehicle to Durban. And right now, we're expecting him to appear at the Westville police station, where he's expected to be booked and processed before he appears in court. His legal representatives have arrived at this police station, and they arrived earlier this morning. So that confirms it that he will be brought here to be processed before he appears in court.
And we know that he will most likely appear tomorrow, given the 48 hours that will elapse by then. But of course, there is still talk about why he has been arrested. We spoke to the police national spokesperson yesterday, who confirmed that the charges would be fraud and obstructing the ends of justice. But it seems as though the legal team, Fadil Adams's legal team, they are not so sure about all of this. Have you been able to speak to them, Zanele?
What we understand is that, yes, he is facing fraud and defeating the ends of justice charges. And these charges relate to the police investigation into the murder of ANC Youth League, former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Makaka. You remember that Makaka was assassinated in 2017, July 2017, in an ambush in Umzimkulu, where he was a councillor of the ANC. Two other women were also injured in that shooting. Makaka later died in hospital, and police were able, the political killings task team took over the investigation, and they were able to arrest Sbusiso Ncengwa and the others in 2018. And Mr. Ncengwa then, 7 years later, while in police custody, he did confess to the murder or taking part in the killing in June last year, and he was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in jail in July. And so police are alleging that Mr. Adams, met or visited Mr. Ncengwa in prison, at Westville Prison, between November 2024 and January 2025. Took statements, and these were several meetings. At one point, he was escorted by blue lights from the King Shaka International Airport to Westville Prison. And the question is, why did he do that? Those are the questions that police are asking. Why did he take these statements? And who gave him access to Ncengwa during this period? And so we are hoping all this will be answered. It will be revealed as this case progresses. And in terms of the nature of the fraud charge, it's not yet clear what exactly is the nature of this fraud charge that he's facing. But that too, we expect to learn as this case progresses.
Zanele, with regard to those blue lights, has there been any indication as to what the source of that was? Was it police, or do we know who actually transported Mr. Adams allegedly from the airport to the correctional facility?
Well, at this stage, we haven't found out those details, but it should be known, it should be uncovered as police are still, investigating the matter. But we're also expecting to see the charge sheets and learn a bit more in terms of the details of these allegations that are leveled at Mr. Adams. Because even his lawyers, they too, initially you remember that Mr. Adams did claim that there was no charge to answer to when he was ordered to hand himself over to the police. And when his lawyers spoke to the SABC yesterday, they did indicate that after learning what he was accused of, then they do understand the charges, and that they do intend to have him or meet him here as they have arrived, so that he's able to answer to these allegations that he's facing. So as I said, as the matter progresses, we're hoping to learn more of what exactly are these charges. We do remember that the Police Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, did also, allude to a political interference when he appeared before the parliamentary ad hoc committee when he was talking about the work of the PKTT. So we do understand that this could also be one of the cases that maybe he was referring to. And so a lot may be revealed as this matter goes before a magistrate here in the Pinetown Magistrates Court. As you said, he's likely to appear tomorrow, but I would not dismiss him maybe appearing later today. But if not later today, yes, he could be appearing in court tomorrow.
Just finally, any indication at this stage as to what time Mr. Adams's arrival is expected?
At this stage, it's not clear. We haven't learned of the exact time. Even his lawyers have been here since early this morning. We do understand that it is a long drive from Cape Town to Durban, almost 18 hours, and we understand that they did take a break during the night and slept over before resuming with the trip. So at this stage, I would not like to speculate on the exact time when he will be arriving here at Westville Police Station. But we will keep you and the listeners updated as the day progresses.
Thanks so much for the update. SABC News reporter Zanele Buthelezi.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAfm.
Well, let's take you now to the Madlanga Commission. And of course, it is day 2 of the appearance of the Hawks head of serious organized crime investigations, Major General Hendrik Flynn. And he's currently testifying about that break-in that occurred at the Hawks premises in November 2021, during which 541 kilograms of cocaine was stolen.
I should be specific now. The facts here are that General Sinona was involved in the decision to take the drugs, the cocaine, to Port Shepstone, and in the end he kept the key. I'm just trying to establish in my own mind whether he ought not to have been subjected to a polygraph test. I'm asking this in the context of the fact that there were polygraph tests here. And I assume that everybody who was involved in all of this saga was subjected to such tests, but he was not. Ought he have been subjected to the test, in your view?
In my opinion, Commissioner, indeed, he was supposed to be exposed to the process, as he played an active role in the Port Shepstone matter. It's not as if he was just the provincial head sitting at the distance. He was privy to the activities. He visited the Port Shepstone offices shortly after the seizure and took possession of the key. That's active participation. It's not as if he was at the distance and that he was not related to this matter. So it's my strong opinion that he was supposed to be exposed to the process.
Thank you, General.
General, I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Baloy's question and the answer you gave, more for clarification than anything else. Were 7 bricks ever taken from Port Shepstone to the FSL lab for testing?
No.
They were not?
It was never submitted, commissioners. It was apparently there was a request for 7 bricks of cocaine to be submitted, but I clarified that point in terms of the process that the investigators would have followed, but it was only the samples that the investigators obtained on the second day when they went back on the 24th. So obviously opening the exhibits, obtaining that samples, sealing it, submitting it to FSL, that was the only samples that was submitted, Commissioner.
So the 7 bricks were never taken?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct, Commissioner.
Thank you.
General, we see here Warrant Officer Mpangase is quite the active person with this inquiry. If this were an investigation, I would have assumed he was the investigating officer. Does it mean he was in charge of the inquiry? Because remember we start off, you said yesterday that Colonel Jacob was the person in charge of the operation, and then he went off. Then you have Mpangase, who seems to be very busy here. Would he have been therefore the owner of this inquiry?
Indeed, the owner of the inquiry, Commissioner Baloy, in the sense that he's the investigating officer. Okay. But in terms of command and control, the responsibilities of the team leader, which will obviously be a captain or at the level of lieutenant colonel, the unit commander, the provincial commander, as well as the provincial head, under these circumstances where it's a major drug seizure, cannot be wiped out. They've got certain responsibilities in terms of inspections and overseeing the investigation, obviously from a higher level. But to ensure that the investigation is properly conducted, all the possible leads are followed up, exhibits are submitted to FSL in time, or then assist if there's blockages in all these processes to ensure that there's a smooth transition of the exhibits from the SAP 13 facility or wherever it was kept to the forensic science laboratory.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Chair. Unless there are no further questions, if there are no further questions for General Flynn, that is the testimony of General Flynn. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, General. You are excused, but perhaps you should wait for the formal adjournment.
Yes, indeed, Chair. Insofar as the next step is concerned, General Flynn will then be excused, which means we finish at lunch. The next witness, unfortunately, is one who has to travel into Gauteng, and today is his travel date to Gauteng, and can only be presented tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning.
Is that because he could not travel earlier?
The arrangements that had been made already had been for him to travel today, to be present at 9:30 tomorrow morning. In light of the fact that there is no threat that he may overrun, we thought it was appropriate to retain the arrangements as were made to cater both for his overnight stay in Johannesburg and travels, and to be presented in the normal hours tomorrow. So we request that perhaps with your leave, we stand down at this juncture to 9:30 when we start with a new witness.
Thank you, Ms. Sillo. Let us adjourn until 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, there you have it. Early adjournment for the Madlanga Commission. They adjourned early yesterday as well, but that was, of course, to afford Major General Hendrik Flynn the opportunity to just cross the I's, cross the T's and dot the I's, so to speak, in some of the evidence that was, of course, brought before the Commission this morning. But very interesting, and they, of course, went through the process of how the drugs that were, of course, seized from the harbour were then taken to the Isipingo police station, which was, of course, the closest. But then somehow there was talk that the Isipingo police station, even though it had housed a Mandrax that had weighed more than this cocaine drugs haul, could not be stored, facilitated at that particular police station. And it was then decided at that point for that drugs haul to be taken to Port Shepstone, which is, of course, to the Hawks headquarters there. And this is where General Senona, of course, as you just heard from the commissioners there, he was, of course, an integral part of what happened when those drugs were transported into that strong room at Port Shepstone, and it was then subsequently stolen from that facility. So there were so many gaps in terms of the processes. It was, of course, asked of Major General Flynn why it was taken to Port Shepstone and whether that was, normal processes. And he, of course, told the commission that generally what they would do is if the police station, which in this case was the Isipingo police station, did not have the requisite capacity to store the drugs, then they would look at other police stations closest to that. And he then went on to name 4 police stations that were closer, Durban Central being the furthest of the 4 that he looked at, and that was within 24 kilometers from the Isipingo police station. But of course, for some odd reason, that was not considered, and it was decided to take these drugs to Port Shepstone. And mind you, the Port Shepstone facility did not have 24-hour guards, and apparently the alarm system was faulty there. So it just raises so many questions. And as you heard Commissioner Madlanga there asking, why it was and whether, in fact, Major General Senona should have also been subjected to a polygraph test with regard to that investigation, given that he played an integral part. But for some other reason, that did not happen. So this is, of course, what that evidence centered around over the past 2 days. And tomorrow's evidence, as if I remember correctly, I think will be in camera. This is, of course, because I suspect that there may be further details about exactly what took place when those drugs were stolen from that facility. So I'm not sure whether we will get to hear much of that. You heard yesterday the commission saying that the media, of course, needs to bring an application if they are at variance with that sort of determination. So we'll wait and see tomorrow what happens. But as far as it was explained yesterday before Major General Flynn started his testimony, tomorrow's witness, that will be heard in camera. But of course, we'll leave it there. Day 102 of the Madlanga Commission.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
5 minutes before 1. Now, the challenge to the National Health Insurance Act has centered around the processes of Parliament and whether those processes provided for meaningful public participation. The Constitutional Court has heard arguments from the Board of Healthcare Funders who say that a legislative process was actually flawed and should be set aside. The Apex Court will also hear from the Western Cape government who argue that the National Council of Provinces also approved the bill without proper review and procedures. And this while Parliament and the Health Department maintain that the process was extensive and that it was compliant with the constitutional requirements. SABC News economics reporter Nosipo Khatebe has the story.
It was a tense day in court as the process behind the NHI scheme came into sharp focus. The Board of Healthcare Funders argues that Parliament did not facilitate meaningful public participation. On behalf of the BHF, Advocate Bruce Leach submitted that consultations were reduced to supporting or rejecting the legislation.
What is clear, however, is that in approaching the public participation process, that was the question that was at the forefront of Parliament's mind. They were not interested in the details of what the public participation comments were. They were interested in that question. Are you in favour of or are you opposed to universal health care? And in that way, Parliament treated the public participation process as being something akin to a plebiscite. And that's not what it is.
Legal representative for Parliament, Advocate Mwako Manechi, maintained that the public knew this was a radical intervention with major financial implications.
BHF's contention that the public participation process was flawed is belied by its own acknowledgement. We submit that Parliament's public participation process was extensive and intensive. That's lifted from its founding affidavits. We submit that the challenge is really not whether members of the public were heard, because they evidently were, and it is not about whether the views of the public influenced the legislative process. They evidently did. Indeed, the overwhelming sentiment throughout the public participation process was support for the NHI bill. The legislatures gave effect to the sentiments of the public expressed during the extensive public participation process. So the representative, both the representative and participatory part of democracy, where we submit were fulfilled. BHF's challenge is fundamentally about the outcome that the legislative process produced.
The court will have to determine whether the legislative process met the constitutional standard for meaningful public participation, or whether the Act should be set aside on procedural grounds. The outcome of the matter, set down for 3 days, could have far-reaching consequences for the future of universal healthcare in the country. Nosipho Khatebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Another interesting one there. And of course, unfortunately, we are out of time, so can't exactly take your comments on that. But of course, we'll be back tomorrow and hopefully we'll have more time for those engagements. And don't forget, stay tuned to SABC News. We are, of course, waiting to see what happens when the NCC leader, Fadil Adams, arrives there in Durban. And you heard our reporter say, not quite ruling out that he may still appear before court today, but I think failing which, and the indications are that it perhaps will happen tomorrow. Well, that's where we have to leave it for today. Thanks so much to the production team for putting it together, making sure it went out loud and clear, and to everyone else who joined us and listened in. And it's now 1 o'clock. Here's Ondelambana with your latest news. Thank you, Sakina and the team. On the top stories, Major General Flynn testifies at the Madlanga Commission, and another case of hantavirus confirmed. For SAfm News, I am Ondelambana, and a very good day. Evidence before the Madlanga Commission has revealed that there were 7 break-ins at the Hawks Port Shepston's premises between 2011 and October 2021. Major General Hendrik Flynn confirmed this during his testimony on the November 2021 break-in, which resulted in the theft of 541 kilograms of cocaine. Flynn told evidence leader Advocate Mahlape Sillo that the Hawks offices were not a secure location for storing exhibits.
In your experience, how secure would you consider premises that have been broken into that many times over a 10-year period? I can make a call. I don't know if this is highly insecure, medium, or low. What comment would you give to that?
Commissioners, I'm of the view that it's almost not secured. It just shows us that there's a lot of opportunities for prospective housebreakers or burglars to gain access to this premises. So,
Northwest Police Commissioner Rhino Naidu says one SAPS member has been arrested in connection with the ATM bombing that occurred in Dinoga near Zerast. 3 suspects were killed in a shootout with the police after being chased from Dinogana to Mahoho village in Mahikeng. An undisclosed amount of cash, high-caliber rifles and ammunition were confiscated at the scene. Naidu elaborates.
According to the estimation, between 10 and 12 suspects were involved in this incident. We have got 2 of them in custody from the chase, and then we have got 3 corpses here, and then we are following 2 or 3 of these suspects who have slipped out of here. So we are looking for practically 4 to 5 suspects still. In the